me tell you, this game is actually much darker than you thought. Oh boy, this game is, let's just say I have my reason to call it Fire Emblem Emotional Damage.
And today I'm going to give you one of the reasons why. Fire Emblem Engage story is on the surface something very lighthearted, with goofy and silly moments all along. However, in reality, lies a pretty dark story about dealing with the trauma of parental abuse.
Foreshadowing in this game is literally insane!
That's a story which, despite its simplicity, was clearly well thought of, with so many elements getting recontextualized from several playthroughs and paralleling with each other. And this goofy and silly adapted facade is in reality balanced with a lot of darker moments. In this video, I am going to explore one of the best examples of why Fire Emblem Engage is emotional damage the game. But first, here are the rules. Number 1. This video contains mention of heavy topics such as parental abuse, violence, and trauma. Number 2. Spoilers of Fire Emblem Engage the game, Fire Emblem Engage the manga, Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War, and Fire Emblem Heroes. Number 3. I will be using the Japanese version for this video because, in case you know my Tumblr or saw my other video, you know that I use it to point at some nuances that were unfortunately lost in the English dub. And 4. I will often refer to the earlier segment of my previous video for this one. So, how do you balance dark moments with silly moments in a story? Well, this is actually pretty complicated. A well-done dark story needs two small highlighted moments in order to let the audience breathe. Else, we will encounter the risk of what can be called emotional fatigue, where at some point you will get bored of the horror that happens to the characters, and once those moments no longer strike as hard as they should, you'll get used to it and it becomes predictable that everyone has an awful story to share. And emotional fatigue results in the audience no longer wanting to engage with the text when it comes to feel for the characters, because they grow accustomed to all the horror that happens to the characters. So having highlighted moments is very important for your audience to be able to take a break from all the horror and drama. However, it's not limited to have one or two jokes or goofy jokes in an ocean of trauma. It's actually much harder than that. It's all about making sure that the highlighted moments are much more appreciated in contrast to how dark the story gets. So, how does Engage does this? I could take so many examples, going from how learning why some characters act the way they do make their goofy antics much more endearing, or how seeing a character that has been suffering for so long showing their tender side can be refreshing. But instead, I'm going to focus on two chapters that are essential in Alia's evolution as a character. Two chapters that are very similar and paralleling with each other. The chapter 2 and chapter 25 of the main story. Chapter 2 of the main story is the chapter where Alia enters Leif's castle for the first time, where Lumira tells them everything about Sunburn and the rings, and where you will train with her in order to prepare for the time Sunburn attacks. Chapter 25, however, is the chapter where they discover that the last guardian guarding the Fair Dragon Shard is Lumira, whom Sunburn brought back as a corrupted, having taken her body from Leif's castle during the chapter 21, and that they have to fight her despite Vale's best effort to prevent Alia from having to face this. In this video, I will demonstrate how chapter 25 gives a much bittersweet tone to chapter 2 on replay mode. Both chapters take place at parallel places. Chapter 2 is one of the early chapters, whereas chapter 25 is one of the later chapters, meaning that they take place at very different points in Alice's journey, while they evolve a lot in between. At the beginning of the story, Alice just woke up and we learn they don't remember anything. They are amnesiac, they know nothing about the world or even themselves, starting as a dragon child. The first time they have to deal with a fight, they want to run away and end up partaking in the fight only to help Fram and Clan, and even then, they struggle. This chapter have a dialogue that activates as soon as you defeat all the corrupted, where other corrupted will appear, and Ali will say this.
新手が来ましたぞ。
そんな、これでは間に合いません。守られるばかりで何もできないなんて。私がみんなを守れれば、もっと私に力があれば。
And then, Marth will appear to help them, and only thanks to Marth's help can they overcome their initial fear and save Clan and Fram. This will be important for later. This dialogue is automatical, and it will appear at some point regardless of how much you progress. For instance, it can be activated if Clan or Fram have a very low HP. Even then, Ali and the stewards are only saved by Lumera's intervention at the end of chapter 1. By the time chapter 25 occurs, Ali didn't just progress as a leader and learn from their mistakes, they also remembered who they were, learned the truth about their birth. They even got to travel in the past to meet their own past selves and became an emblem themselves. The emblem of Fairy Bond. This will be important for later. Let's say that compared to how they were in the early game, scared of everything and the corrupted in particular, they made a lot of progress by this point in the game. And in the meantime, we got to discover how important Lumera was in Alia's life. So those two chapters are actually very important in Alia's character writing. So, in terms of structure, the placement of those chapters are very important in order to contrast the very different reaction Alia will manifest. Those chapters are clearly meant to be parallels, and that's something you can feel in the gameplay as well. In chapter 2, the combat phase is divided into two parts. The first part consists in defeating Lumera and take only at least a quarter of the full map, with only 2 creations to defeat. Once you defeated Lumera for the first time, she will then teleport near the fountain and summon Sigurd. This will be important for later. You will then have to form a new formation using your units to progress in a vertical progression rather than an horizontal one, with more creation to defeat, while Lumera will be able to freely move using Sigurd. In chapter 25, the map is much bigger, while your units will be divided into 2 groups depending on how much you will deploy for that map. And much like the second phase of chapter 2, you will have to move in a vertical progression. Compared to the coziness of chapter 2, chapter 25 is an actual battle. But it also feels like a maze with several doors to open, and by looking at the design of the map, a dangerous maze Alia has to go through to attain Lumera, who in this chapter will not move like she did on chapter 2, but will wait for you to come. This is rather important considering it's in chapter 25 that Lumera opens up about her past. This maze-like disposition is indicating of Alia finally seeing who their mother truly was. For the record, I have a similar reading of Fofur's map in the Xenologue, where in both cases he is the objective to reach. In chapter 6, the final boss map, it's Ollie and Nell going through a long maze-like path to finally reach the true him and save him from this state. Well, that's the same here. Alia and their friends need to travel this maze-like map to finally free Lumera. Free her from being corrupted, and even deeper than that. Chapter 2 has to be one of the moments that is the most full of foreshadowing in this entire game. For instance, when Lumera teases to Sombron being an entity from another world, which will be revealed in chapter 26. But most importantly, and what many noticed, Lumera's reaction to learning that Alia can summon emblems by the use of invocation, and when in the second phase of the fight in chapter 2, she calls upon Sigurd, using prayers, she does not speak a single word. But most importantly, about Lear and Lumera herself. In Alia's case, chapter 1 and 2 are full of hints that point at them being a fey dragon from the start. Their reaction upon learning that they are divine dragon that saved the world and thinking about the war. Their reaction to the corrupted, their main trigger, with the reason of their fear being in reality related to their trauma. The way they hesitate when saying, I am home, in entering the false castle, which makes sense as their real home is in reality Gradlon's temple, not Lifo's castle, the place where they died for the first time. Anyhow. And also why Alia often makes small sounds when Lumera mentions the 1,000 years ago. Alia's amnesia turns out to be post-traumatic. This is the conclusion we can draw from all those little deja vu expresses, and they are bound with Tiki. Having sense of deja vu, making nightmares that are in reality memories when seeing something linked to your past, triggers not forgetting about the sensation despite the lack of real memories, those are clear signs of PTSD. At the beginning of the story, Alia wants to run away when they meet the corrupted. We all know why. It's because the corrupted is their biggest trauma. They can't stand them even past their amnesia. The mere sight frees them, as shown here, later when meeting Lumera and in chapter 4. They also can't stand anything that remotely looks similar to the corrupted, such as Lumera's creation. From chapter 1 to 10, we learn that Alia is unable to understand the difference between running away and retreating. Well, remember Alia? In the description I put a link to a post that compares regular Alia stats to post-Alia stats. And in chapter 18, when Zephyr remembers Alia, she says,
中でもひときわ優秀であった燃えるような髪と瞳の巫女様はうっすらと記憶にあります。確か名は
Alia was the only surviving child during the war, the only sibling that didn't die. When we met them in chapter 24, all of the siblings, save Veil, are all dead. Alia could never have afforded to run away. They had nowhere to run away. Pet dragons are hated by everyone because of someone's crimes. Had they tried, someone would have tried to kill them. They know that. They also knew that no matter what foes they faced, they had no other choice but to be victorious. Had they run away, they would be killed. Even if the enemy was stronger, even if they were scared, they had no choice but to be the stronger one and to defeat them. In chapter 24, when Alia fight them, they say,
怖いという感情を表に出すことを許されません。
What's interesting is how Alia delivers this line. The feeling called fear. Kawaii toyo kanjo wa. That's a way of distancing Alia from fear by showing that they don't know how emoting feels anymore. If they are not allowed to show fear, they conceal it, and the constant repression ended up resulting in an alienation where Alia can no longer understand how it feels to be scared because they cannot emote anymore. They have become strangers with any emotion, and fear in particular, even though it was the one emotion that drove them to commit terrible things. If you keep experiencing the same pain over and over again, you will eventually be unable to feel pain any longer. Apply the same thing to Alia. Fear is a feeling they felt so much that they ended up becoming completely desensitized to it. They concealed it to the point they can't feel it, but not because they overcame it or that they aren't scared, but because they had to go through this for so long that they are unable to react to anything anymore. This makes you look at Alia being scared in chapter 1 in a new light. They meet the monsters that terrorized them, that killed their siblings. Even if they don't remember it, they remember the one feeling that they repressed so much to the point of not even recognizing it. For years, they had to force themselves into growing stronger just to survive, and now, even though they don't remember anything about it, they want to do what they have been wanting to do during these long 1,000 years of hell. Running away, running to a place where they are far from those monsters who terrified them, running to a place where they are finally safe, far from the fighting that they hate, finally allowed to do the one thing they wish more than anything, running away from danger. Alir, not knowing the difference between running away and retreating, comes from that. In the past, they were allowed to do neither. They had to win the fight, to conceal their fear, and to grow stronger, no matter what. All alone, without a single support to come to their aid. The fact that Alir still needs to learn how to overcome their fear shows that back then they didn't do it. They were simply forced to repress it and to fight in order to survive, guided by a greater fear, the fear of dying. They just wanted to run away. This was their first reflex, because it was the one thing they weren't allowed to do when they wished for nothing more than being far from the battlefield, far from the corrupted, far from danger. Finally, they can stop having to put a facade and fight their feelings when all they want is to escape. Alir admitting their fear isn't mere exposition or telling. It's them finally being able to show their weaknesses, finally allowed to be vulnerable without fearing for their life. It's them finally learning how to master their emotions rather than repressing them. Alir's weakness at the beginning of the game is even more striking. Remember when they end up wanting to help Clan and Fram? Well, remember what Pastor Alir said about wanting to help Vale? That's it. Pastor Alir couldn't run away, but they couldn't save their sibling either, and they bear guilt for that. When Alir saw the corrupted multiplying, they wept over the lack of strength, saying that they want the power to protect everyone. Pastor Alir felt that toward their siblings. They just wanted to support them. They wanted to support Vale. They felt guilty for being paralyzed by fear and not stepping in when their older brother got drowned, when their older sister got burned, when their younger siblings got ripped apart by the corrupted in front of their eyes, and that they couldn't do anything. After all, Alir called their younger siblings kawaii, which indicates that they felt something for them, even if the current delivery shows their incapacity to feel anything. This adjective is indicating that deep down, Alir is still a sensitive and kind soul who genuinely wanted to get along with their many siblings. That, and the justifications they gave for hating the corrupted, being their role in their siblings' death. The same feeling of guilt and feeling of uselessness replay as this time Alir witnesses two people who wanted to help them risk their life and getting in danger because they wanted to help them, because Alir wanted to run away. Marth's presence is precisely what helps Alir feel braver, but back then, 1,000 years ago, Marth couldn't support Alir. He was there, watching them silently, kept awake by the power of the Fell Dragon. Alir never felt support, and even with Marth by their side, they couldn't feel brave, because they were just using him, like their father was using them. Marth's presence in the game as a guide feels different. It feels like Marth is compensating for all those years where, despite being by Alir's side, he couldn't speak a word to help them feel supported, to help them not feel alone or reassured that nothing bad will happen to them. Marth can this time actually help Alir and properly guide this broken child. With their memory gone, they can start anew, but the whole feeling repressed was still there. A child that at that time was so broken they were frozen to a much younger age, speaking like a child, and yet they had to always push the boundaries and hide everything. They had to put a facade to survive, but even amnesiac, the fear still remained, and it all resulted in that one scene where Alir doesn't even try. They don't remember, all they remember is feeling the same thing as their past self, wanting to run away, so different they can express it. And when Lumera explains to Alir the power of summoning emblems, that is what she's saying.
皆のためを思ったのね。これからも権限の時にはその気持ちを忘れないで。決して奪うためではない。守るためにその力を借りたいのだと。
はい。
In Heroes, Emblem Mouth in his level 14 dialogue with Kiran confirms that the emblem's power is indeed changing with the intention of their bearer. In chapter 22, when Alir summons Mouth again, even though he is in Dark Emblem form, Mouth is able to smile. which he never did when someone used to summon him, because of Olir's intention. Which means that when Olir used to summon Emblem 1000 years ago, their intention wasn't to borrow power, they were stealing it, as their only focus was survival. Which again is fitting, since someone himself refused to build connection with others and only use them. Hence the reference to him stealing strength from others rather than borrowing from them. And while we don't see how much time Olir spent with Lumera in the past, seeing how much they changed from chapter 24 to this cutscene of chapter 22, it is possible that Pastalir finally learned how to summon Emblem with a good intention. All the more so when the reason they fought Sunrun was to end the war and finally be a hero that saved the world. Pastalir is a broken person. They saw all their siblings died in awful ways and lost their mother at a young age.
Speech in the Japanese version is a bit particular. They use kanji and speak in a very polite manner that is meant to convey their kind and sweet demeanor. Pastalir used the same speech, with the difference that they speak entirely in hiragana. Hiragana is an alphabet that people who begin to learn Japanese learn first, therefore it's considered to be for children. And in Engage, the children characters such as Jean and Anna do use hiragana. In the fake monologue as well, young Nell and Neil use hiragana.
僕がどうして父上やお姉ちゃんみたいに大きな竜になれないの？
いる。泣かないで。
僕が出来損ないだから、強くないから。
However, I did not and Ruffle pretending to be Neil or both using kanji.
すごく優しくていい人だから。僕は神竜様のこと好きだよ。
So, when Pastalir talks about their dead siblings, something more twisted about this occurs. At first we are struck by the violence of the death of Olir's siblings, but then, when you pause and dissect this scene, it manages to get more messed up.
お兄様は水につけられて死にました。お姉様は炎に焼かれて死にました。可愛かった妹や弟は異形兵に襲われて死にました。戦争で死んだ兄弟たちもいますが。
The fact that Olir is able to precise how each of the siblings died is showing something. They were there when it happened. It happened right in front of their eyes. Their older brother being drowned, their older sister being burned, their younger siblings being ripped apart by the corrupted, the dead bodies of their siblings dead in the war and thrown to be food to the corrupted. They saw it all. Now, about the delivery. If you recall Fulka, when Luciferia and Edelgard shared the backstory, the text clearly indicates that they are getting emotional. That is not the case with Pastalir. Even though they call their younger sibling cute, they say it in such a way that it seems like they can't feel anything anymore about it. And this contrasts a lot to how Olir was barely capable of talking about Lumera without feeling they will break out and cry. And in comparison to current Olir, who speaks rather naturally, past Olir's speech feels very on the nose. There is no subtext to be had or rather little. Their cue is dry, cold, simple, robotic. And that is showing how broken Olir is. The fact that they can't emote anymore and speak so coldly show the psychological damage they suffered. And that is not all, because Pastalir speaks like a child. They use hiragana, which means that they have the same alphabet as a 10-year-old child. Note though that while Anna, Jean and Vale still use some kanji, Pastalir speaks entirely in hiragana, which not only reinforces this childish feeling, but even implies that they got broken when they were very, very young, and that their speeches reflect that their mind is frozen to that young age. This, coupled by the robotic delivery of their line and the emotionless tone, creates a very unsettling feeling, to say the least. And another thing about hiragana is that the reason why people begin to learn this alphabet is because it is less polysemical than kanji. So, this means that Pastel Deer's speech feels even more devoid of emotion and has very little subtext. Moreover, Arya's politeness is no longer seen as politeness. In their past state, it is a sign of their oppressed mindset. Their politeness is cold as opposed to Alia's warm politeness, and it is here to show that they talk and behave like a tool.
They are physically 17, meaning they spend at least this much years trying to stay alive, and they speak like a child while sounding emotionally broken. Saying that this version of Alia is unsettling is an understatement! When Alia fight their double, they say that they are envious because they say what they feel out loud and shows it. Both Alias say what they think out loud but never shows anything. This difference in their expression shows that Alia is more mature emotionally, but also stable. They are capable of emoting and communicating in a way that isn't unsettling, in a way that is natural. The opposite of Pasalia, whose expression is oversimplistic. They say things in an almost robotic way, and what would be considered clumsy exposition in another context, seeing how they are openly speaking of their life and fear of dying in a context that would not fit. But here, it shows the emotional damage Shambron put them through. It puts an emphasis on Alia's robotic state. Alia speaking of what they are feeling and confiding in people so often is a callback to that. To hold back then Pastalia had no one to tell about their fear and feeling support. That is until they meet Lumera. Lumera herself is saying things that beneficiate from recontextualization once you know the whole story. For instance, when she is telling Alia not to run away,
戦場では誰も待ってくれないの。どんな敵でも立ち向かわないといけないわ。どうか逃げないで。あなたは私の子。皆を守る神竜なのよ。
わかりました。
In chapter 25, we learn that what Lumera is teaching Alia is something that she herself had to experience, being the only remaining living divine dragon.
ずっと寂しかったの。1000年前の戦争で私は一人ぼっちだった。父と母を殺され、仲間も殺され、それでもただ一人で戦わないといけなかった。神竜たる私が諦めたら、逃げてしまったら、世界が道連れになってしまう。
Lumera and Alia's name in the Japanese version are respectively Lumière and Lueur. Those two words belong to the lexical field of light, light, which is a symbol of hope. Lumière, as the divine dragon, the symbol of hope for Helios couldn't give up, no matter how alone and sad she was. Even though she had to lose all her family, her parents and friends, her entire kin, she was still standing alone, fighting against someone, because if she, the symbol of hope itself, had given up and run away, the world would be doomed, and someone who symbolically represents despair would have won, and Helios would have been nothing but ruins, much like what we see in the Felsenelog story. Lumera knows how important it is for her as the divine dragon to fight no matter what. So, she's teaching this meaning to Alia, a future life. Alia at the beginning of the story is only a gleam of light, a small glow, because they are still weak, young, immature, and need to learn so that they can become a light too. Knowing that Lumera had to face loss after loss and yet never gave up, and kept on fighting against Sombron so that light could one day shine bright upon Helios like it used to, despite being all alone, this advice is actually rooted to even deeper roots than one might think on first playthrough. This is the reason why Pasalia admired Lumera so much they wanted to be like her. Lumera and Alia both shared this in common, being the sole survivor of their family. Lumera lost her entire kin, Alia lost all their siblings, and had already parted with Bale, giving her their Dragonstone as a proof that they were still alive. But while Lumera was fighting and didn't run away because her kindness pushed her to go through her grief in order to protect everyone, Oli was forced into fighting for no other reason than fear, knowing that soon enough they would be killed, trapped in despair as someone described them in the final battle.
空前の灯火で消える前の光目
Akari is the kanji that means light, but can also be read as Somoshibi, which refers to the light of a lamp, a glow of light. So when someone compares Alir to the weak light of a lamp that goes out before the wind, it's referring to how Alir used to be, a weak light that survived so many atrocities but is engulfed in despair, holding it back from shining with its full brightness. A small miracle in an ocean of despair. Alir being the one survivor of the family is the weak light, glimpse of hope that managed to survive, and no matter how weak it is, still shines, but possibly not for long. Alir being named after one of the French words for light already makes them connected to Lumera more than someone, and thus seeing Lumera strongly and bravely standing against the enemy no matter the loss she had been experiencing, and showing kindness to someone who is an enemy nevertheless, made a strong impression on them, who spent years alone and only motivated by the fear of not dying. As shown by their reaction to Lumera's kindness, she was a role model Ali could look up to and finally find a meaning to their existence. In chapter 24, Ali asked Past Alir what they would do once someone's wish is granted.
ソンブルが望みを叶えた後、あなたはどうするのですか？私はただ
Pastalia Sensei indicate that they didn't know. They have the same mindset as a robot that is. All they do is obey to orders, hoping not to end up like their siblings. They are unable to think as much as they cannot emote, save for tiny bits. Again, the way they say the first thing that comes to them without putting much thought into it is showing how broken they are, that they are literally behaving like a machine. So when Lumera showed them genuine kindness, this woman was fighting all alone for no other reason than to protect the world and make sure that others wouldn't fall into despair. This was the meeting they needed. They found light, hope that day, someone to guide them, a dream to live for. They found someone whose strength resided in the kindness of their heart rather than their power solely, and wanted to be like that. A divine dragon like Lumera, a hero that saved the world, that inspired others with dreams and hopes, becoming light. In chapter 2, this is what Lumera is actually referring to this attitude she had 1,000 years ago, and that which inspired Alir to betray someone and fight this day to defeat him. In the same vein, Lumera rewarding Alir with a shining sword is a reference to the wish they made upon that day before they fall to sleep.
ありがとう。いつか叶うのなら真っ白な服を着て輝く剣を持ってあなたのような世界を救う神竜に。
In chapter 25, defeating Lumera also results in Alir inheriting the sword she was wielding. This sword, Libération, means freeing in French. Considering that the whole story is about Alir having to defeat Sombron, the source of despair and their despair in particular, and having to help their only younger sister, while the other weapon they can acquire is called Wheel Glance, which means shining wheel in German, there is an EV symbolic in the name of the two weapons. If chapter 25 is the final trial for Alir to prove themselves as the divine dragon before finally defeating Sombron, the way they go from a weapon about liberation to one representing a shining wheel is again showing Alir's evolution. From needing to free themselves in this journey, they end up developing a shining wheel, much like Lumera's, the shining wheel they witnessed her demonstrating 1,000 years ago. But what is Alir freeing themselves from, you ask? Like I said in my video, Engage and Fire Emblem as a whole is clearly influenced by Buddhism, and while I'm not that knowledgeable in that topic, I think I can still explain it. In Alia's journey, they express several flaws such as fear, dependence, passivity, arrogance, envy, hatred, and so on. All which are flaws that one, according to Buddhism, must learn how to free themselves from. It's the concept of detachment. Non-attachment or detachment is a state in which a person overcomes their emotional attachment to or desire for things, people, or worldly concern, and thus attains a heightened perspective. Hence, liberation can be seen as a reference to the word nirvana, as both means the same thing: freedom, being freed. So when Alia becomes an emblem, they reach that state of enlightenment. Yet they still have trials facing them to prove themselves as a divine dragon. Them becoming an emblem is them reaching the apotheosis. It's them being freed. In chapter 2, Numera is actually giving Alia the key for them to finally be freed. Hence, they gain a new soul to symbolize this wheel glance, shining wheel, reflecting the undying determination they manifested all along their journey, like Lumera did 1,000 years ago, like all of Fire Emblem's heroes did during their own journey, showing their strength stems from more than simple power. It stems from their strength of character, their determination, their kindness and compassion. It was a power that their allies and them built upon their connections, borrowing strength and courage from each other to make it as far as they did. However, they also went above and beyond what others expected for them. Earlier, as I said, is neither just a divine dragon or fell one, they are both and more than that, an emblem. And again, in reality, their nature matters to them little toward this point of their journey. In chapter 20, Alia's allies still accepted them despite learning of their blood, because they realized it was Alia's nature all along, that the Alia they knew was always perfect dragon. So Alia was always Alia. What mattered wasn't their birth, but who they were as a person, and the fact they were simply wishing to become the hero that they wanted to become when they settled on that journey. But in chapter 22, when Alia comes back as a corrupted, they are initially more worried because they know that corrupted means Alia's nature as a person, their soul could be deformed. Which is why once they realized it was still Alia, they accepted them despite becoming what is pretty much a zombie. And when Alia becomes an emblem, they still accepted them. And if you go to talk to some of your allies on this map, they'll tell you that Alia's body, form, appearance, Sugata matters little. What matters is who they are inside, their soul, Kokoro, which again ties with the Buddhist concept of reincarnation, where no matter which body the soul incarnates, it is still the same soul, which is what matters to the characters. Alia themselves show they understood it as heroes if you reach level 14 with legendary heavily. She will tell Kiran about how she possesses spell blood, but that she isn't ashamed of her origins. What defines her as a being isn't her birth or past, but her present actions, and no matter what state her physical body might be, divine dragon, emblem or corrupted, she will offer them support, even if Kiran decides to become someone else. Again, Alia's dream is to become a hero, someone like Lumera, a dragon that would protect and save this world. As long as their dream is still possible, they won't care about their physical form. Alia's journey is about becoming the hero they want to be, learning from their mistakes and better themselves. With their strength being their kindness, this is what Lumera taught them, as someone who was ready to fight for the world no matter what. However, this might have weighed upon her, a pressure she had to deal with. The second element of important foreshadowing is the ring of the connector.
それからこれも
指輪、これも紋章師の指輪ですか？
これは私が作ったただの装飾品。約束していたの、眠る前のあなたと。
約束？
お誕生日にあなたに似合う素敵なものをプレゼントするって約束。内緒で作っていたのだけれど、出来上がる前に眠ってしまったから。
あの時に約束したお誕生日はとっくに過ぎてしまったけど、これをあなたに。
This question about it being an emblem ring, for instance, is very interesting considering that it is what this ring turned out to be. Lumera, however, insists it is simply a birthday gift. However, this ring is at the center of two recurrent thematic, birth and promise. As I said earlier, Alice's sword and thus the several revival can all be linked to the concept of reincarnation. Yes, I know they are being brought back to life through resurrection. However, their forms keeps changing. In the beginning of the game, the screen will ask you to choose between two forms, appearance, Sugata. However, as we established, the game is saying fully that your form doesn't matter, only your heart, soul, Tamashi, or Kokoro. 1,000 years ago, Halia tried to kill someone and to defeat them to fulfill their dream. However, they got deeply wounded and would have died without Lumera's intervention. As Halia laments that their dream won't be fulfilled, Lumera says this.
なれるわ。あなたなら生まれ変われる。いつかそんな日が来たら、私あなたに似合う素敵なものをお誕生日に贈るの。
Umare Kawaru, reborn, is composed of the verb umare, born, and kawaru, changing. Hence it means both literally and metaphorically a rebirth, someone changing their form or their identity, which ties with what the developer said about Engage's theme being about living the life you wanted to live, being the person you wanted to be. For example, Larimo being reborn as Yunaka because she decided to change, she is thus born again. Well, in Aya's case it is both literal and figurative, as they are indeed reborn at the beginning of the game as a fake dragon, divine dragon hybrid, without any memories, ready to start anew as a white blank page. That is what at least Lumera believes. They often bring up their birth. For example, in the Japanese version of Chapter 3, they say this.
今日はいろんなことがありました。神竜王ルミエル。あの方は優しい方です。会わせてあげたいです。前のままの私に。きっと素敵な親子だったのでしょうね。眠る前から。いえ、私が生まれた時からずっと。
Believing that Lumera is the biological mother, they believe that things have always been like this even since their birth. And that is when they make this dream about their past in Chapter 3, the day before their rebirth, the day this Lear is born. And when Alfred tells them to join him to save Pyrenees in Chapter 3, right after losing Lumera, Halir will say this.
だから今は生まれたての赤子のようなもので、友達としていろいろ教えてくれると嬉しいです。
Halir is comparing themselves to a newborn, which is relevant in the context of rebirth. Besides, do you know how we say newborn or baby or infant in Japanese? Akago, which is written with the kanji for red, aka, and child, ko, so literally a red child, lucky due to the complexion of babies when they are born. Akago. Coincidence? I don't think so. After all, past Halir represent Halir's childhood, their past, and they even speak like a child. The gift Lumera made was in reality a rebirthday gift. A gift for Halir as he would be reborn as a new person. Which is why in reality, Halir obtains it only after remembering the promise they made with Lumera and becoming the emblem of Fear Reborn. In reality, for Halir's rebirth to be complete, Halir needed to remember about the truth they had forgotten. However, throughout the story, only one memory would ever return to them. The promise they made with Lumera. So when Lumera appears in the flashback wishing an happy birthday to Halir and the franchise, she's actually celebrating their rebirth as an emblem, as the hero they wanted to become that day. After all, Halir did say they died not knowing they had become the hero they wanted to be, but they still haven't saved the world. which is why they ended up getting reborn, this time as a cultist with the help of Veil, showing they are also freed of their fear and have overcome one of the great trials, defying death itself to save the world their mother entrusted them with and fulfill their promise. In chapter 22, when the corruption leaves their body and that they cannot be saved anymore, upon realizing that they would forever be parted from their friends and that they wouldn't be able to save the world, they cry.
またそんな風に悲しませて、せめて最後に役に立つことができてよかった。みんなをここで死なせずに済んでよかった。でも本当はみんなと最後まで共にいたかったです。お姉ちゃん。やっと指輪を取り戻せたのに、やっとみんなで手を取り合えたのに、託された使命をこの手で果たしたかった。平和になった世界をこの目で見たかったです。
The emblem decided to bestow upon them the miracle to reward them for the incredibly determined will they demonstrated, offering them a new body and a new power as an emblem. Hence, in chapter 22, Alia's rebirth finally happened. They finally regained their memory of that very important promise, and they are ready to face the final trial soon enough. As I said several times, Alia have subconscious memory. While their brain aren't able to identify the moment to which the sensation they feel should be associated, their body still remembers it. As such, they still recall the feeling of fear they associate to the corrupted, have sensation of déjà vu, and have vision about their memories under the forms of dreams. In reality, the scene we see in chapter 22 is something we saw twice without being aware, in the prologue and in chapter 3.
In chapter 22, a cutscene that already played twice is now replaying. Because this scene and this scene are actually this scene, but portrayed differently. In the prologue, it is portrayed as a dream, what Lee would have wished had happened that day. In chapter 3, it is out of context.
This is what the developer said about engage's meaning. To engage means to attract, but engagement as a noun also means a promise or bond. Those meanings are all very important to the story. In the trailer, there is a scene where Lee is making a pinky promise with their mother, Lumera. As the journey progresses, Alia, who loves their memories, gradually gets closer to the truth of what happened in the past. Emblem Marth, who fought with the protagonist 1,000 years ago, comes back to Alia at the beginning of the story to fulfill a promise he made before Alia went to sleep. So Engage is a very important word both in terms of the gameplay mechanic and the story. Alia's memories are all linked to a promise they made to Lumera and Marth. The promise Alia made with Marth is shown in the prologue, and it's quite literally the words we can hear in the interlude of the opening.
ありがとう。君のおかげで世界は救われた。僕の役目はここでおしまいだよ。けれど、僕はずっと君のそばにいる。あの日のように、隣に立つ日を待っている。もしも、いつかまた会える時が来たら、思い出してくれ。僕のことを。君と共に戦った12のエンブレムのことを。
最後まで君の力となろう。あの日のように隣に立つ日を君が望むのなら。Hence, why Marth is speaking about Ali remembering him and hearing his voice. It was the first hint of memory Alia began to retrieve. The other promise earlier we tried to remember all along the game is the one they made with Lumera, which they are referring to during Lumera's death.
最後じゃないです。母さんの作った指輪、記憶が戻ったらくれるって約束しましたよね。それに起きたらゆっくり話をしようって、そう言ったじゃないですか。
Another promise they made was to Veil, a promise that helped her stay hopeful as she was searching for them no matter what happened to her and no matter how many terrible things she had to go through. But again, the fact that the only memory from 1,000 years ago that mattered to them was the promise they made with the people that mattered to them does show how much Lumera deeply impacted Alia's life as a parental figure. A promise about Alia's rebirth as the hero that would save the world, the Divine Dragon.
真っ白な服を着て輝く剣を持ってあなたのような世界を救う神竜。
Earlier and Lumera's talk in Chapter 2 about this ring, the constant reference to memories and promise was in reality preparing this very important moment. However, Lumera might have feared about earlier getting their memories back. Lumera knows of Olia's true nature, however, as Sigurd explained, even though seeing Olia not recognizing her saddens her, she wanted to hide the truth from Olia, hoping it would allow them to be happier this way. Hence, when 1,000 years ago she was the one who steals someone away after Olia slowed him, it was in reality the same as what she's doing in the game. Lumera hiding the truth from them is the same as stealing away someone. She's stealing the truth away. She's stealing their past away from Olia, which is not what Olia needs. In reality, if they want to fulfill their dream, they need to be the one to slay someone, their abusive father, the source of their trauma and despair. Hence, someone being able to break the seal is the same as Alia's memory sleeping within them and being ready to pop up again, transpiring by little glimpses. But Lumera is someone with this sincere wish that Alia could be reborn and that the two of them could finally be happy together.
あの子が目覚めて本当に嬉しいわ。これからはずっと一緒にいられるのね。話したいことがたくさんあるわ。見せたいものやしたいこともたくさん。一緒に話して、お散歩をして、ご飯を食べて、それから。
The way Lumera speaks of Alia might seem a bit childish, especially given how she's using the expression "Zutto Ishoni," together forever. At first, when she says this, we would just think it's because she was separated from her child for so long and that she can finally spend time with them. But the reason for her to say this are actually more tragic than we might think at first. Lumera experienced parting with her parents, her friends, until she ended up all alone, having to fight alone for 1,000 years. She lost everyone without any hope to ever see the people she loved again. Sesame, this little buddy who bonded with Lumera for long, having a little companion like this surely must have helped her not feel as lonely as she felt after experiencing loss after loss during this war. If we look at Sumi's design, it is small. It has round shape, which we usually associate with soft shape and thus cuteness. It is a strange little animal with hair that look like that of a kitten, but barks like a dog, with a funny little tail. It shares Alia's color palette in how it has a white and blue fur and wears a little red scarf around its neck. It would follow Alia everywhere once its affection is at max level, and you can hear the sound of its steps sounding like it's squishing. It's a cute little mascot, and if we consider the context of its friendship with Lumera, that they were playing together when she was a child, it makes sense. Somi looks like a plush a little child would play with. But, in the context of an older and lonely Lumera, this little buddy might be the only source of comfort she could find, the only friend that was with her forever since her childhood, a reassuring presence that might remind her of her happy childhood. days of innocence from where her family was still alive. We know from Somi's interaction with Leah that it loves to eat and be pet, that it will follow Leah everywhere no matter at which speed they run, and that when Leah does sunny activities such as fishing, walking out, flying on river, Somi will share on them if you choose to do the activity with it. If Somi was like this with Blumera, we can easily see how Somi could have been a source of comfort. However, Somi's dislike in its diary entry indicate that he dislikes how everyone it's ever known up until now eventually goes away. According to Vander, Somi was friends with Blumera for such a long time it also had to experience the loss of the Divine Dragon it knew, Blumera's family and friends. These two were alone for quite a long time, and clearly were marked deeply by how they ended up being in this situation in the first place. No matter how warm Somi may have been, nothing could change the sad reality of Blumera having to fight against a powerful enemy who killed all the people she loved all alone, with no guarantee of survival, knowing that the world rests entirely on her shoulders alone. It doesn't matter how comfortable and peaceful the Somniel is, or Lipos castle is, because battle is still waging outside. Blumera, much like Lily, couldn't stay safe in that tower of ivory. She had to go face her dreadful and powerful enemy no matter how scared and sad she was, the same struggle Halia will have to face in the main story, because if she doesn't, who will? So when Blumera is saying, together forever, Zutto Ishani, it's her wish to never have to experience loss like this ever again. Unlike someone who refuses to connect with anyone because he associates connection with loss and suffering, unlike Zephyr, who is unable to bond sincerely with anyone because she feels that no one would genuinely love her, Blumera still bonded with Leah despite experiencing loss after loss. And when Leah was going to leave her again that day, she instead smiled and made Leah the promise that they would be reborn and that they would become the hero they wished to become that day. When Sombron stabs Leah from behind, the spell he is using is Obscurity, the only dark magic spell in all of Fire Emblem Engage, which can only be mastered by Fire Dragons. Again, symbolism. Sombron who represents darkness, ruin and despair, inflicting a nearly deadly wound to Leah, lure a blossoming hope using Obscurity, a spell that means darkness in French. By doing this, Sombron blew up the light, the weak limb that struggled for so long to stay alive. When Leah got stabbed, they clearly lost hope in their dream, seeing their last line.
やはり邪竜は滅びる定め。正しい竜にはなれませんでした。
If we analyze this sentence, Alice's words are pretty pessimistic. In the Japanese version of the prologue, Sombron tells them when they fight, Omae wa koko de orobiru sadame.
お前はここで滅びる定め。指輪はすべて我のものだ。
It is your fate to perish here. Ali, as they die, repeat those words, Horobiru sadame.
やはり邪竜は滅びる定め。
In fact, Pastalia said it. They always knew sooner or later, Sombron, or more accurately the corrupted, would kill them. They always thought of this. They had no other choice and yet they kept on fighting, and then became the strongest of Sombron's children, just so that they would live a bit longer, with no real hope for tomorrow. Hence why they said it was their fate to die as Jaryu. Ja means vicious, wicked, evil in Japanese. The fed dragons are referred to as Jaryu, which translates as wicked dragon, vicious dragon, evil dragon. This name might be an indicator that in reality the dragon tribe's name aren't indicator of their true nature, but to how they are perceived. Chrome and Pandra's bone conversation is precisely about how Divine Dragon might just be a title given to Naga, that Naga isn't the nature of the dragon, but just a title that is inherited, with Pandreo wondering if it is the same for Fate Dragons. And we know that Grima back then used to be simply known as the creation. So the name of Fate Dragon, Evil Dragon, would simply be how humans named him because of the misdeed he committed. The same can be said about Engage, where Divine Dragon become a title that Halio inherits, a class. After all, their class is Dragon Child, so they need to work hard to become a Divine Dragon, reflecting how they need to go on a journey to become the Divine Dragon. The same can be said about Sombron. After all, in the main story, he is the only Fate Dragon, and he committed hundreds of crimes. That his bad reputation would have a negative impact on anyone who is connected to him, especially his children, isn't that surprising. And in Ali's case, they had been forced to kill people and do horrible things just to hope to survive, so they would be seen as evil even though in reality they were just a scared child. So when Ali is saying that it's their destiny to die as Jariu, they aren't only speaking of the nature of Fate Dragon, but of their action. They are dying as a villain when they wanted to be a hero like Romera. So this line is pretty sad, as it's showing Alia doesn't believe that their dream will be true, since they are dying without having saved the world, without having become a hero. Hence, why they are saying they will never become a virtuous dragon, which in the context is the contrary of Jariu. Tadashi means being right, as in being in the right, which can simply be referring to being right about something or being morally right, being righteous, virtuous, the opposite of vicious and weak. In short, a righteous dragon. This is what Harry wanted to be. Why they went as far as fighting someone all alone in hope to save the world, in hope to be like Lumera, to atone for their previous misdeed, to be remembered as a hero and not a villain. Remember the cutscene in chapter 3? That dream I saw? This cutscene is titled Red Memory, Aka no Kyoku, which is one of the lyrics of the opening song Emblem Engage. Aka no Kyoku moe hagari. And in this scene, Harry views himself as having an evilish smile, because this is how Postolier believed there were an evil dragon, a villain. Without the full context of this scene, Harry also saw himself as having this evilish smile because it's clear that Harry bore some self-love for how they used to be back then. After all, they compared themselves to the corrupted, the creatures they hate more than anything, and hates anything that slightly reminds them of the corrupted, such as Lumera's creation in chapter 2.
異形兵、偽物でもやはり嫌な感じがしますね。他の訓練方法はないのでしょうか。
So if Pasalia is comparable to the creators they hate and fear so much, why wouldn't they hate themselves as well? The Corpse's music is here to convey musically Alia's fear. The use of electronic and the rhythm creates an unsettling vibe, attempting to deliver the impression delivered by the corrupted, as Alfred described them. They are things like people, but trapped, almost crumbling. A cacophonic melody that attempts to recreate the way the corrupted works in the game.
フランは僕が守る。お前なんか怖くないぞ。うわっ。
However, the electronic sound gives a robotic feeling to this music, likening the corrupted to machines, robots, mechanical monsters. And as I said many times, Postolier behaves like an automata, like a machine. This is how Postolier resembles them, the monster that kills so many of their siblings, and why they think of them as evil. Why, in chapter 24, they are an enemy that Alia have to fight. The corrupted represent a state of decadence, so Alia becoming like the corrupted in the past, despite being pretty much alive, is a degrade. a decadence in of itself, compared to chapter 22, where they became physically corrupted but still managed to retain their essence. Pastaria was corrupted from the inside rather than the outside.
Focus on the corrupted more closely. In the Japanese version, they are called Igyohei, deformed soldier, because of how their corrupted state disfigures them, and that they end up looking like broken people with a black mask, as Alfred described them. Now, the fact that they are deformed shows how being revived by a fair dragon robs people of their true nature to turn them into something deformed, twisted from their original shape. Which is why, even when they are brought back in a metabolic way, they still feel unsettling to others. Despite being trapped in such a body for a short time, O'Leary was still the same person as we knew. They weren't corrupted of their true essence. However, O'Leary, despite being alive, as they point out, are like the corrupted. They are deformed, deprived of their true nature, of the person they want to be. The fact that O'Leary is the child of Sombre shows that they are a weak light and trapped in the darkness, and are surely to extinguish. They are deformed mentally speaking. They are corrupted, and thus it explains why O'Leary seems to have some self-love against their past selves, before meeting said past self and realizing that in reality they were just a scared child.
They, when they spoke to Slimes, were thinking that it was the hard reality, that they would remain this way, that they would never be able to construct for themselves a new identity. The expression Yahari means as I thought, as I expected, and thus that Arya did expect it to die, as they currently were, an evil dragon, a villain. This line alone is already translating Ophelio's complete resignation that their dream to become a hero will not be true. In this cutscene of chapter 22, the use of hiragana is no longer here to convey the sensitive feeling I was speaking of earlier. This time, it's to convey a warm feeling, letting Elia's childish personality of that time shine as them showing their innocent side, their weaker and true side to Lumera. It's them dropping the facade and finally revealing what they were concealing when we met them in chapter 24, an innocent, kind child.
Where Alia dies is actually full of information about how much Lumera meant to them. The bright innocent smile, the sweet tone, the fact that their eyes are sparkling, the contrast is immediate. In front of Lumera, Ali is what they were inside. An innocent child forced into a life that is not for them and would eventually break them entirely. A kind soul that wished no harms on others and was forced into this way by fear. The fear of dying. This one scene is enough to show how much Alia loves Lumera and how much she means to them.
How Posterior's blank and emotionless gaze in chapter 24 contrasts to the warm, bright and tender gaze they gave to Lumera in chapter 22. The sentence they speak is no longer intended to be read as emotionless because of this. Because now, the property of the hiragana as conveying the childish innocent feeling, like it does with they for instance, is the one aspect that is exploited in this scene. It's to show Arya's innocence and childlike nature, their warmth. This immediately makes their Tadashi Ryu ni narimasen deshita all the more tragic. They speak, this time, with the tone matching the undertones of the hiragana. Unlike how in the past they used that childish dialect with the tone of a robot. In fact, the change of tone in the voice shows the shift in tone, despite how Posterior still uses the same alphabet. All in context. This is no longer to express a broken child speaking, but to show Posterior's innocence and to emphasize their love for Lumera by showing how they reveal themselves to her only. When Alia greets Lumera, they say,
あなた一人で。
やりました母さん。これでこの戦は。
Yarimashita, which means I did it. And at this moment, it's not only I defeated Sombron, the war is over, but I defeated him. I became like you, a righteous dragon that saved the world. An expression meant to show their innocence before they got stabbed from behind, and then pronounced this very sad sentence with the same tone, but this time it's a child crying, a child grieving over the lost dream, thinking now it will never become reality. And despite having experienced loss after loss, instead of going along with Alia and also thinking the situation is hopeless, Lumera smiles and promises them that they will be reborn, reassuring them that everything will be fine, that they will be able to live and see their dream granted. She isn't even promising they'll be forever together. The toy show. She's only focusing on reassuring Alia about their dream right now.
なれるわ。あなたなら生まれ変われる。いつかそんな日が来たら、私あなたに似合う素敵なものをお誕生日に贈るの。
ありがとう。いつか叶うのなら、真っ白な服を着て輝く剣を持ってあなたのように世界を救う神竜に。
Upon hearing those words, Halia ends up regaining hope, and the two makes this promise. You can hear it. Lumera, who had experienced so many people leaving her, wasn't going to abandon Alia. This time, there was hope. And instead, for 1,000 years, she did everything she could to bring them back and allow them to be reborn. She gave them her power to heal them, turning them into a divine dragon to make them her heir. She placed them in the Somniel and let them sleep, healing in peace, allowing only a small number of people to come, that being some believers and royalty. And to those people, such as Vander, she told that Halia was the hero that bravely fought Sombron with the help of the rings, that they were the dragon that saved the world. What Halia wanted so badly to become, the last words they uttered before falling in coma, right in her arms.
叶うなら、真っ白な服を着て輝く剣を持ってあなたのように世界を救う神竜に。
She told them everything she knew and what she had to afflict to herself 1,000 years prior, and she even died for them. Because to Lumera, Halia was also her hope. In the same way that Lumera is Halia's hope, Halia was what saved Lumera, saving her from the despair created by loneliness. Once Halia woke up, her dream to finally be with someone she loved and to never experience again the pain of losing her family was finally able to be granted. This is what Lumera in chapter 25 tells Halia as well.
私はずっと寂しかったの。1000年前の戦争で私は一人ぼっちだった。父と母を殺され、仲間も殺され、それでもただ一人で戦わないといけなかった。神竜たる私が諦めたら、逃げてしまったら世界が道連れになってしまう。そんな中、あなたに出会ったの。あなたは無垢で純粋で悪意がなくて、愛情を一つも知らなかった。敵なのにどうしても殺す気にはなれなくて、ダメだと思いながらあなたと心を通わせた。あなたが私の名前を呼んだあの日から私は一人じゃなくなったのよ。母さん、お願い、もう私を一人にしないで。ここにいて。いいえ、せっかくソンブル様がもう一度私に時間をくれたのだもの。諦めないわ。 相手があなたでも止められない。だって待っていたのよ。ずーっと待っていたのだもの。1000年間も。
Alia was Lumira's hope to never be alone again. She already had to face all alone during the war the loss of her entire tribe, and yet she never faltered. Remember chapter 5 of Engage? Alia decided to have to fight to help Alfred and Celine. This takes place 2 chapters after Lumira died. Alia had barely the time to make a proper funeral for her. They just took some time to bid her farewell by talking to her phone and telling her they would fulfill the promise they made as she was dying in their arms. So Alia found themselves quickly in the same shoes as their mother did 1,000 years ago. And how does Alia react?
その聖なるお力はまるであなた様のお母君のよう。神竜ルミエル様はお元気でいらっしゃるかしら。
母は亡くなりました。
そんな。一体なぜ。
殺されたんです。城に侵入者が現れて、それで母は私をかばい、敵の攻撃で命を落としました。
ああ、なんということなの。
今回は助けられてよかったです。イブ女王がご無事で。
どうされましたか。
すみません、少し母のことを思い出してしまって。母のこともこんな風に助けられていたら今も共に過ごせていたのだろうかと。
神竜様、私にはあなた様の深い悲しみを癒すことはできません。ですがただ受け止めることはできます。目覚めたばかりの身でお母君を亡くされ、さぞおつらかったでしょう。どうか今は思いをこらえずにいてください。
イブ女王、ありがとうございます。あなたの手が温かくてよかったです。元気だった頃の母さんのように。
Let's analyze this dialogue. Both Alia and Queen Eve's cue are composed with a lot of suspension mark, which marks a silence, an hesitation, a difficulty to speak. In that context, it is grief that quite literally prevents Alia from talking about Lumira without feeling sadness. They lower their eyes and find difficulty in properly explaining what happened. They pause, they hesitate. The moments of silence are very present to show Alia's inability to speak. Their sentences are simple, very simple. They speak little words. Again, this contrasts a lot compared to how in chapter 24 Postelia was able to speak of their siblings' death without lowering their eyes or showing an hint of emotion. Again, showing how much this Alia was broken. They said things without any hesitation. Mark, pause. If Alia is in such a state of sadness having lost Lumira, then imagine how much weight Lumira had to bear having to fight when she lost everyone she knew and loved, with no one to console her and grieve with her, no Queen Eve to support her at the time. It's no wonder that Lumira placed so much hope in her relationship with Alia. It was what saved her at the time. There's not even mentioning how Lumira would place this much pressure on herself, that she still believed she could fight like she used to when she was younger, despite the fact that she is an old dragon that sacrificed part of her lifespan in exchange of bringing Alia back and resulting in her losing all her magic eventually. Besides, we learn in the Engage manga that Lefort's castle was originally kept by only the previous Seawards and Lumira. She used to protect it all by herself, using her magic alone. So when she tired out and had her condition worsened, she still nevertheless put an act on and kept on fighting, because if she doesn't, who would? So when Lumira is talking about doing what any parent would do, because all that mattered to her was that Lee would still be alive and awake, This cue that at first would seem like simple mother love that one would do for their own blood turned out to be in reality about a lonely woman determined to save a child whose life has always been unfair so that they could have a chance to grant their dream, to save her own and only light, what saved her back then from despair and loneliness, as she had to hide her own weaknesses to protect others, just so that Ali could still have a chance. Like I said many times, Ali's death and the fact they still come back in a way or another is symbolical of them being the internet of hope. No matter how tragic the situation has gone, hope never dies. Light always prospers, always shines. Lumera still believing that there is a chance for Ali to pursue her dream is quite a proof of that. That is why corrupted Lumera is the complete opposite of the woman we knew. As the name indicates, corrupted Lumera is a corrupted version of Lumera. Instead of the loving, motherly figure who would encourage her own child in always growing braver, this version of Lumera is the complete opposite. She is deformed, denatured. Let's see a dialogue with Veil.
ごめんね、みんな。
まあ、来てくれたのはあなただけなの？
我が子に殺されるよりはいいでしょ。
勇敢なのね。お話できて嬉しいわ、ベイル。あなたはあの子の妹なのだそうね。それなら私の子のようなものだわ。母さんと呼んでも構わないのよ。
嬉しい申し出だけど、私にはママの記憶があるから遠慮するわ。
まあ、お母様の？どのような方なのかしら。
優しくて温かくて愛情の深い人だったわ。物心がついた頃には死んでしまったけど、最後まで私を守ろうとしてくれた。いつかパパの封印が解けてしまったら、その時間違った方に行こうとしていたら、家族として止めてあげてと言っていた。
私をもう一度殺すというのね。
え
え。痛かったわ、あの時の魔法。体もだけれど、それよりも心が。我が子と引き裂かれる辛さでどうにかなってしまいそうだった。あなたさえいなければ私はあの子とずっと一緒にいられたのに。
否定はしないわ。元はといえば全部私のせい。操られ、あなたを殺め、指輪を持ち去った。だからせめて私が責任を取る。恨んでもいいわ、あなたは。ここで倒れて。
あら、この程度？今の私はソンブル様のおかげで前よりもうまく戦えるみたいなの。あなたとはできれば仲良くしたかったのだけれど、あの子とお話しする前に殺されるのは困ってしまうわ。一度仕留めたからと見くびっていたのなら甘いわね。死ぬのはあなたの方よ、この欠陥品。
In Fire Emblem Heroes, if you reach the level 40 with mythical Lumera, who is implied to be Lumera after they defeated her in chapter 25, she will ask Tiran what would they wish if they happened to be walking in a path of mistakes. Help or wishing for others to fall. That is in reality referencing what Veil told her before you fight her. Veil herself had to keep fighting no matter what adversity she faced to help her father, in order to honor the promise she made to her own mother, because Alir and Veil parallel, that if someone would be repeating his mistakes again, Vale would stop him. Because as Vale said, her mother actually loved Sombron, and Vale herself had the same hopes as Lumera when she heard that Sombron was back, that they could be a family. But while Lumera's wish was prevented by her death, Vale's wish was not to be because of Sombron's attitude, leading to what happened to Lumera to happen and the story to occur. So when Vale is speaking about how family is meant to help and support each other, to stop them when they are mistaken, to guide them on the right path, this is referring to what Alia will be doing when defeating this version of Lumera, because I mean, look at her! Compared to Chapter 2 where Lumera made small movements and speaks in a much sweeter tone, this Lumera is making great movements. Almost as if she was performing, she's screaming, she's making over-dramatic movements. The way she leans her head makes it as though her body was broken. And the corrupted design shows that they are all fractured. They are supposed to look broken. Hence, their lack of consciousness, and yet another parallel with Postolier. Corrupted Lumera is a broken Lumera. The way she moves reflects how twisted she is. A Lumera corrupted by someone's power. Again, Sombron's name comes from a French word, sombre, which means dark. However, sombre used to be a verb, which means to darken, to corrupt, to unshade, which is what Sombron is doing when he corrupts people, bringing them back as dead living soldiers, denatured, grotesque, deformed physically and psychologically. Lumera corrupted went from a loving mother figure to an obsessive woman with a twisted sense of motherhood. The woman who 1,000 years ago was the one who told her that they weren't a defect is the one calling Vale a defect in that scene, showing the decadence Lumera went through. This version of Lumera is just Lumera's despair personified, which you can tell from what she's saying, talking about her loneliness, her sadness. Hence, the main aspect of her map in Chapter 25, with Alia finally reaching the sad side of Lumera that she always had repressed for the sake of everyone, to seem like the perfect divine dragon. Strong, determined, no matter what, never letting people reach her, seeing beyond appearances and how she is in reality a very sad and lonely woman. Think about it, how well-meaning the stewards may be, and no matter how attached they are to Lumera, they were still not able to realize that she had sacrificed so much of her magic just to save Leah. They only realized it when it was too late for them to save her. And indeed, even though they do revere her as a deity, theirs, this isn't enough to make Lumera not feel alone. There is a reason why Ali is so uncomfortable when people worship them, and it's because they are, without realizing it, creating a wall between them and Alia. The best example is the support Ali has with Marine.
ありがとうございます。もし断られたらって不安だったんです。僕、珍獣に興味があって、特に竜族が大好きなんです。え、私が珍獣？中でも神竜様は世界で一人きり、唯一無二の貴重な存在です。そんな神竜様の生態について、今日は話を聞かせていただきたいのです。珍獣？どうしたのですか？いえ、何でもありません。質問をどうぞ。
Look at Alia's face. Look at how they repeat rare creature. Without realizing it, Marine is in reality dehumanizing Alia. She's calling them a creature and taking notes of what Alia is telling her, asking for things such as their food habits and daily activities, which is what Marine, as a pet lover, usually does whenever she spots a pet that she finds interesting. She is sitting and noting on her notebook about what this animal likes to eat, do, etc. Without necessarily realizing it, she is doing the same thing with Alia.
Because of her divine behavior, I have decided to name her
Divine One?
Now that I think about it, she's also very graceful and majestic. Perhaps I should name her Grace, or Majesty, or Debbie.
That is why Alia doesn't like being worshipped, because people don't love them. They just worship the Divine One. They don't see Alia. Whenever Alia ends up accepting that someone continues their antics with them, it's because they realize that in reality Sekacto was just trying to get to know them better, albeit in their very clumsy, kinda crazy, loony way. They let Shram continue her sharing when they realized in reality she just wanted to know them earlier better. They accept to let Marin write her book because again, she was trying to know them better. Them! Earlier. Elia's reasoning in wanting to be equals to their lives is not only that they are very polite and modest, but they do not consider themselves as above or that different from humans. And that goes without saying. It's because when they are overhyping on them like they do, people are creating a wall between them and Elia. Keep in mind, in their past, they were alone and didn't get to have a true bond with their siblings. So a clear case can be made that Elia suffers from being touch-starved, especially when Lumera says that Elia never received love. And considering that in the past, they were dealing with being dehumanized because they were treated like a tool, a product that can be disposed of at any moment if proven to be defective, the way the character worships them can result in them being dehumanized. He's showing that it's resulting in how Elia used to be treated in the past, even if this time it is as a deity. Now, apply all of what I said about Elia to Lumera. Lumera is used to it because she grew up in that environment, and like Elia, who was thrown into it without knowing more about Divine Dragon. So, compared to Elia, who would often voice out loud their discomfort as much as their weaknesses, Lumera kept it all buried inside and just smiled. Even if the stewards sincerely liked her and treasured her, her other believers weren't as close. They could change to not believing in anyone or another faith, which is what happened to Elusia and Movia's mother. The only way for Lumera to find an equal, someone who would love her and not worship her, was her family, and they were all gone. She is the light, the guide, the hope. She cannot confide in the stewards or her believers. She couldn't because of the pressure, because in her mind, had she the Divine Dragon, her personified, showed doubts, or that she was sad, people would have stopped believing in her, and would have fallen into despair, because this isn't the image we have of a deity. The main reason why people still choose to believe in Elia no matter how weak they are, is that Elia's honesty with themselves and their lives, the fact that they are clearly dependent in the early game, that they admit their weaknesses, made them realize that Elia is like them, and that even if they can make mistakes, they can better themselves and learn and grow. Someone who is perfect doesn't need that. So if they were to show a flaw of some sort, this would result in people turning their back on them because they betrayed that image of perfection, compared to someone they know is flawed but can still hope will better themselves. This is, for example, what Yune from Radiant Dawn is illustrating. Unlike her counterpart Ashera, who shows no patience for humans' flaws, she accepts that gods aren't perfect, and she still believes in humanity's capacity to better themselves. So Lumera's only real equal was Elia. Elia was the only person she could have a genuine bond with, where she could show herself as something other than the Divine Dragon Monarch. Lumera, when you reach her level 40 in Heroes, will tell Kyoan that she's grateful to them, because thanks to them she can still live longer, and do what she wanted to do. See her dreams come true, love, cry, being silly and spend time with Elia, have long nice chats with people she gets along with, fulfill the promise she made. Likewise, in the Engage manga, we see two faces of Lumera. A Lumera whom in front of a believer is calm and composed, and another Lumera who is silly, enthusiastic at the idea of spending more time with Elia, keeping a little journal where she keeps notes of every moment she spent with Elia. In chapter 3, we learn what she hoped to do with Elia.
あの子が目覚めて本当に嬉しいわ。これからはずっと一緒にいられるのね。話したいことがたくさんあるわ。見せたいものやしたいこともたくさん。一緒に話して、お散歩をして、ご飯を食べて、それから。
Those little things such as chatting and eating together may seem trivial, but for someone who lost their family for so long, it's actually a chance. If you give her the pack ring, This diary entry indicates that she and Alir would spend time eating and chatting together, the same activities Lumera wished she could do with Alir, because she has been alone for so long that simply spending time with someone doing this is a chance for her, a dream, which does show how those little moments are in reality treasure that help build a bond, that allows you to not be alone anymore, spending time with those that you love, something she wished so deeply, spending time with her child, the only person who could make her feel loved and saved her from loneliness years ago, that even in that broken state, she still expresses the same wish.
私はただあなたと過ごしたかっただけ。一緒に話してお散歩をしてご飯を食べて、それから
Lumera's love for Alir became an obsession in her corrupted form because of her desire never becoming true, of her hope having been deceived. Even though she spent so much time alone fighting for the sake of others, even though she never gave up on the hope that Alir would wake up, and that the two would be reunited, and that she would finally cease to be alone, a wish for whom she waited for so long and offered so much it endangered her health never became true. We don't know how much family members exactly Lumera lost. We know she lost her parents and her friends, and from the pact ring, we know that Lumera might have had a partner which in the xenologue is possibly Alir's father. Some have speculated that she bonding with Alir had more than children might have inferred that she used to have children who died during the war. But the fact that the actions she wished to do in particular revolves around chatting, sharing meals, and having strolls together indicate that those are activities Lumera used to have with her family and that she wished to share with Alir. She wanted to live the same experience with Alir, to spend time with them and give them the love they never received. Knowing that she was fighting in a war and that only when Alir was sleeping was peace back, when the two of them could have spent time together, when Alir woke, all of Lumera's long dream could finally come true. Hence why she's saying in chapter 25 that the pain of her heart shattered hurts her more than the pain Vale inflicted upon her that day when she killed her. Just when she finally was reuniting with Alir, this happens. The dialogue Lumera has with Alir in chapter 1 is quite indicating of the sheer happiness she has.
ついに目覚めたのね。本当にあなたなのね。
はい。助けてくださりありがとうございました。ああ。
会いたかった。え？あなたが目覚めた気配がして早く会いたくて飛んできたの。どこも痛いところはない？体が動かしにくいだとかは？
大丈夫です。
よかった。母さん、ずっとあなたに会いたかったのよ。
You can tell from Lumera's cue and the deliver the emotion she is feeling in seeing Alir awake, to the point she literally throws herself in their arms, saying she went as fast as she could when she sings them, because she can scarcely believe that her child is finally awake, that her dream can finally become true, and that she will finally be able to spend time with them. This line that at first could just be read as a mother happy to retrieve her child, hits so differently when you know about what Lumera went through, what Alir represented to her, and why she waited for them for so long. It's a lonely woman reuniting with her only source of joy and hope back in the day. With this time, the chance they can finally be a family without being apart like what happened 1,000 years prior. When Lumera learns about their amnesia, she's clearly conflicted upon what to do, because Alir, whom she waited for so long, doesn't recognize her.
母さん、ずっとあなたに会いたかったのよ。あなたが母親？どうしたの？まさかあなた。
This is the meeting between Alir and Lumera. Lumera calls herself Kasan, mother. However, when asking the question, Alir says Hahaoya, mother. While the two means the same thing, there is some nuance in Japanese, with Hahaoya being more polite and formal and less of a title than Kasan, which is a casual way of saying mother, mom. And seeing how upon waking up Lear immediately used the formal suffix sound when talking to Vander for the first time, it's probably a mark of reflexive politeness on Lear's part. However, Lumera calling herself Kasan isn't just to show her love for Lear or their closeness. It's how Lear used to call her in the past, and eventually does after her death. So when Lear called her Hahaoya, it immediately triggered Lumera's attention, because the separation made it even more obvious that Lear forgot about her, especially as in Japanese dialogue, when asking a question, characters often repeat the word that the previous speaker just uttered, like an echo. So you would expect Lear to ask, "Anata ga Ka-san?" rather than "Anata ga Hahaoya?" Lear using Hahaoya is translating into their complete loss of familiarity towards Lumera.
The disappointment in her voice is clear. However, she's clearly pondering on what to do. On one side, she wants Lear to remember her. On the other, she wonders if they wouldn't be happier if they could forget about everything that they have been through. The loss they had to experience in the past that turned them into a broken individual. Because, I actually wonder if they could be able to handle remembering everything. Anyhow, as Lumera said, it doesn't matter. She still loves Lear regardless if they recall of her or not, and still views them as her child even if they don't see her as their mother right away, thinking that there is still time to solve that problem. In the same way as Lumera's comment about Lear's high color on first playthrough, read as the writer wanting to express that Lumera is a loving mother who is finally reunited with her child. Knowledge of the full context make this scene hit very differently, since we know that Lear's high color changed. So when Lumera is also saying she accepts Lear as her child no matter what because Lear is reborn in her eyes as a divine dragon, these lines come from how the last thing she saw that day was Lear with red eyes, and now she meets them with a new color, indicating that they are reborn. They can use that power and wield their weapon, until she does learn about how Lear summons Emblem through invocations, and teach them about the intent.
輝け始まりのエンブレム。気がつけばその言葉を口にしていました。そうしたらマルスが助けに来てくれたんです。
呪文でマルスを顕現させたのね。その時あなたは何を願っていた？
私はただクランとフランを助けたいと。失うのは嫌だ。私が守りたいと。そう思ったんです。
皆のためを思ったのね。これからも権限の時にはその気持ちを忘れないで。決して奪うためではない。守るためにその力を借りたいのだと。
はい。
A very important lesson that will be illustrated through While I think Ella's character arc needs to be recontextualized with their past, I'll mention it first independently of it. And for that I'm going to have to bring up the three versions of Lear we have in Heroes, because they represent Lear in three different phases of the character arc. Female Lear is a Lear at the beginning of the Feminist arc. Male Lear is a Lear during the Golden arc, while Legendary Female Lear is a Lear at the end of the journey. Female Lear's bond with Marth are showing she still isn't used to fight without him, and it's used as a cute comic where hard of a bit she keeps mistaking her Marth for Emblem Marth. But if Female Lear is defeated, she will scream.
Mother. 不覚です。母さん。
This is showing Halia's dependent side, which can be seen early in the game where at first they wanted to run away when meeting the corrupted, where they couldn't save Pram and Plan until Marvel for his help, and even then they needed to be saved by Lumera. Again, in Chapter 2, Halia expresses fear at the idea of fighting more corrupted, Sombron, and even Lumera's creation, leading Lumera to give a little lecture about why as a divine dragon they have to face any enemy they encounter bravely, which we know is something Lumera had to apply to herself, and when Lumera died, Halia was begging for her to not leave them. I'll come back to comment on this later. In the Fairness Chapter 4, when Halia, after saving Ceiling and her retainers, is taken by the beauty of Flora, a corrupted jumped out of nowhere and they were too frozen to react, leading in Veil helping them. And after successfully rescuing Queen Heve, Halia is so overwhelmed after hearing mentions of Lumera that they cannot hide their grief any longer. Halia still misses her terribly, and through the game, we will constantly have Halia being confronted to helping someone save a parent, as someone who had to lose their mother, which they did with Queen Heve, where they end up wondering if someone had helped them the way they did with Queen Heve. When Lumera needed help, had they been able to protect her instead of being the one protected like they grieved in Chapter 1 when Fram and Clan got themselves in danger to protect Halia? Would they have been able to save her then? Would they have been able to spend more time with her then? Camelia's defeat quote being her begging for mother's help shows this dependent side of Halia that they had in the early story. They never forgot about the pain of losing Lumera, which motivated them in helping people. If we go back to this dialogue they have with Queen Heve, Halia's comment on Queen Heve's hand being warm like Lumera's hand was when she was still alive is indicating this as well. In Chapter 9, Veil thanks Halia for bandaging her, saying that their hands were warm, with this warm reflecting Halia's kindness. It's the same here, with the difference is that there is a hint of sad nostalgia that Halia is expressing, regretting they couldn't have spent more time to appreciate Lumera's kindness. Halia is also missing Marth, and he is from a universe where King Morion and therefore Lumera too are dead, meaning he also just lost Marth and is trying to recover from that. His quote when he's defeated is,
It's too much.
しまった。この痛みは。
The foreign bond he had indicates that this idea comes from after King Morion's death, meaning after he lost the emblem and failed to save King Morion. This change in the defeat quote is showing that after this hack, Halia isn't as dependable of Lumera and even Marth anymore, as the big character change Halia has to go through is to stop being this dependent on the emblems. In reality, Marth's presence in the main story for the first half, acting as a mentor figure, is showing how dependent and relying on Marth Halia was back then, and how they came to slowly become less and less dependent of emblems. Hence, why they are less present on screen and Halia reuniting with their mentor only in Chapter 21, which is to say, when they die. Anyhow, in Chapter 1, it's thanks to Marth they become braver when they struggle at fighting to save Pram and Clan, and in Chapter 3, we are afraid they wouldn't have been able to defeat the Elysian army. In Chapter 10, they get more confident because of their friends, and said it's thanks to Marth that they are this much confident, right? And when they lost Marth, they weren't only devastated because Sombron got closer to his goal, but also because they lost their angel guardian, their mentor and their friend, the person that helped them being braver. The Brodian hack was the occasion of Halia committing a strategical mistake that resulted in them losing the rings, However, they didn't want it to retreat because of the promise they made with Lumera to not run away, that they couldn't abandon their friends, the Emblem, especially when they are in that state. Obvious posterior parallel. In the same way that at first, even when Marth warned them about the risk, they refused to give up on trying to save King Morion, as it would mean abandoning him. Something that Lumera told them in chapter 2 not to do because she herself couldn't do that. She couldn't abandon the world. And Alice too showed that they were like Lumera. After all, wasn't their kindness the reason why they ended up trying to save Fram and Clan anyway? Deeming they couldn't let two people who were just trying to help them getting killed because they wanted to run away, blaming themselves for that situation? It's because in the entire story, Alice's character is about how despite their weaknesses, they follow Lumera's advice of fighting no matter the enemy, following her example where their kindness and compassion is the strength that leads them to save people, even if they are afraid. That is what they say to Diamond in their sea support. They are scared of the corrupted, but they fight anyway, having to prepare themselves mentally to not show fear, because if they, the Divine Dragon, don't fight, the world would be doomed. That is why one of their victory quotes is, "I am not afraid anymore. No, also deny." It's another battle where they had to steel themselves and defeat the enemy that scared them. This is also shown in the Engage manga.
In the manga, Alia is subjected to a PTSD crisis that makes him almost faint, and he is forced to retreat by the Prius of Lithos, even though he actually wants to help, and he managed to break from this, to help a little girl, saying that there is no way he will run away.
Alia is saving this little girl no matter what happened, even though the illustrations show he is sweating and nervous, does show that Alia's kindness and compassion is what is leading him to try and save people no matter how scared he is, what motivates Alia in trying to overcome their fear and fight against it. This is something shown through the manga as well. In chapter 5 of the manga, Alia is the one who kills Nelush, deeming him unforgivable because their kindness made them absolutely furious for what he did to the people of Ferne, which is also present in the game with how Alia sees the beautiful landscape of Flora in chapter 4 turn into ruins and set on fire in chapter 17, feeling the pain of not having been able to arrive fast enough to save Flora Port. That's also the kindness that allowed them to sense that Yunaka was in reality someone who genuinely wanted to change, and that Alchrist attacking them was just so that he could protect people he thought was in danger. When he's fighting Hortensia in chapter 8, that's also the same quality that enables him to point to Hortensia the pitiful state in which her soldiers were during this battle, illustrating what Lumera was talking about when she's talking about borrowing power and not stealing it. And finally, what motivated him in standing up for Ivy when King Morgan was about to kill her, because he sensed that something was off. Alia's strength is their kindness, their compassion. That is what, much like Lumera, motivates them in not giving up, leading them to develop this undying will, but is also their biggest flaws. That is the kindness that led them to put their lives in danger, since it was why they didn't want to abandon the emblems once they stole them. Because they couldn't abandon people they considered to be friends, especially Marth, whom they relied on so much and needed, as again in the early chapters, they are very dependable. This is also what leads them to be reckless, as shown in their support with Ned, Gregory, or chapter 21, where they offer their own life to protect Vale, like Lumera did to them in chapter 3. And in the past, it's what led them to fight someone all alone in hope to save the world and fulfill their dream. And no matter how kind Alia is, they cannot help everyone. They couldn't save Lumera, as they regretted several times. They couldn't save King Morion and the emblems. They couldn't save Flora Port or the inhabitants of Girouport. They couldn't help Diamond and Alchrist save their father, nor Ivy and Hortensia save their father. They still encountered shortcomings and have flaws that they needed to work on themselves. But when you take into account their past as a third child, their evolution is all the more striking. From Lumera and Marth's description, Alir, even as a third child, was a kind person, which we can see in how they comment on their younger siblings being cute and wishing to actually be helping Vale and wish they could have helped their siblings. After all, they hate and resent the corrupted for killing them, and when Lumera showed them a bit of kindness, which they commented on being the first time for them to experience it, it was enough to make them feel conflicted upon killing her. We know through Vale's plotline that Sombron perceived kindness as weakness, so Alir's kindness at the moment is what caused them to call themselves a defect, Kenkanhin. So when Lumera tells them,
そんなことを言ってはダメ。あなたは欠陥品なんかじゃないわ。
it's even more than showing them kindness. It's also noticing how Alir's kindness, even though it would endanger them to spare her, was actually creating this conflict where they couldn't bring themselves to do that, speaking like a child would do. Lumera noticed this, hence why she's saying this. Much like Alir does in the game and in the manga, when they meet, Lumera clearly sensed that Alir wasn't evil, that in truth they were kind, hence why she's saying this in chapter 25.
あなたに出会ったの。あなたは無垢で、純粋で、悪意がなくて、愛情を一つも知らなかった。敵なのに、どうしても殺す気にはなれなくて。ダメだと思いながら、あなたと心を通わせた。あなたが、私の名前を呼んだあの日から、私は一人じゃなくなったのよ。
Marth, who has been with Alir for 1,000 years, also tells Alir in chapter 3 that they were always kind, but he cannot tell them the truth. Marth clearly expressed concern over Alir learning about their past, as shown in chapter 10, where he doesn't want them to encounter someone in fear he might recognize them. Even in the past, Alir was someone who was kind, and as established earlier, Alir's name in the Japanese version is linked to light. Alir's luminous nature comes from their kindness, which is a quality they already had. However, it's something that Sombron deemed a defect. Therefore, they were forced to repress any sign of fear and sensibility to the point they became so repressed they couldn't even emote except for tiny bits. Something that clearly indicates that they would soon completely break. A weak light about to finally go out. The life offered by Lumera and she herself being in evidence that kindness can be a strength gave Alir a new goal in life, a new hope. A way for Alir to actually fulfill themselves, blossom as a person, which can be seen albeit shortly in the cutscene of chapter 22, in how Alir reacts to greeting Lumera. First, Alir was grown up with someone's philosophy of strength became very powerful as indicated by their stats. So much that they could take over Sombron, but even that wasn't enough. Sombron's philosophy and how he uses people is quite literally stealing power from them rather than borrowing it for the sake of others, as seen by how he treats the emblems versus how Lumera and Alir treat them. Sombron views them as mere tools, the same way he treats everyone in his army or by his side, even his own children. While Lumera told Alir to not use anyone in such a way. That is what Alir as an emblem represents, the strength of bonds created from building a relationship with others rather than profiting of their strength without returning. That is what Sombron did when he absorbed the power of the rings and threw them away because he no longer needed them, like he always does. His final dragon forms look hardly different because Sombron's dragon form was always his true nature. Hence, it only is an awakened state of Sombron's dragon form. As a matter of fact, Sombron's strength always came from taking from others without returning, whether it is his manipulation of his children, or how his faction is constantly trying to steal the rings when Alir received them from the warlords. As Lumera said, as a proof of trust, even those who were once their enemies, all thanks to their kindness. But also the vampire aspect of the rituals that are organized for him, showing how he gains strength and power by stealing from others and sacrificing them, reducing them to this state of corruption and decay. However, when Alir gained the power of the miracle, it was the emblem that chose them, to reward Alir for having always fought until the end and did everything they could, even defying death itself, to help others, pushed by their kindness that led them to develop this shining and undying will of theirs that they sensed in Lumera for never giving up no matter how many failures and hardships they faced. It wasn't something they stole, unlike Sombron, but that they gained, and through none other than their sincerest wish of saving this world, to the point it would lead them to cry. Even vanishing, Ali was wishing to help others, until the very end, and cried that they couldn't do that, fulfill the promise they made to Lumera. Alia's color palette and Lumera are also essential to the narrative.
Clash of white for the Divine Dragon against the black for Sombron and his faction.
Lumera is constantly associated to the thematic of the sky, which is a simple layer. The reference in the opening the name of the Somniel and Somi being Soranel Sora, written in katakana here, but who phonetically can be identified as referring to the word Sora, which means sky in Japanese, mythical Lumera's name in Heroes in Distant Skies, the promise she made with Alir in chapter 25, telling them to protect the sky, which legendary familiar references in Heroes, this sky is constantly associated to Lumera. The sky is also associated to the following symbolics: freedom, infinity, eternity, light. The link between these two and freedom is easy to establish, considering that this is how Alias first told Liberation is named. Eternity is also a reference to Alias' emblem incantation spell, Emblem Eternity or Emblem Eternal in English. As for light, the sky is where the sun is, a source of light, and the sun is a star, which is Mars' signature. Again, Lumera and Ali's name are both inspired by the French word for light. Lumera's palette is the same color as Ali's, but on a pastel tone, and her hair and eyes color are the same color as the sky, light blue. However, Ali is more often linked to fire. When Zephyr recalled them in chapter 18, she described their red hair and red eyes as being like fire.
中でもひときわ優秀であった燃えるような髪と瞳の巫女様はうっすらと記憶にあります。
How is it important? Well, the most recurring colors in Engage are red and blue. In the cover art for Engage, we see the blue sky being opposed to the red sky, and this thematic is also present within the game. Before someone gets the power of the rings, we are often shown a blue bright sky. But after it takes over the power of the rings, the sky suddenly becomes red. In Fire Emblem, blue is the color of the player's army, while red of the enemy army. Ali's hair and eyes reflect that. When they are Fell Dragon, their hair is red and eyes are red. When they are in full emblem mode and in the Fell Xenologue, it is blue, albeit of a darker color than Lumera's. However, there is another symbolic. It seems at first that red matches with black and blue with white in terms of the heroes are cladded in white, whereas the villain are dressed in black visual the game is going for. But we see that's not limited to that. Firstly, because the story establishes that Fell Dragons aren't inherently evil, not even Sombron. Secondly, because of how it is used in the scenery and as parallelism goes. For example, before Ali remembers what really happened in chapter 22, they see this scene twice before. In the prologue and then in chapter 3. The prologue is in reality a dream that Ali had about what happened in the past. In chapter 1, Ali woke up from a long sleep and they were dreaming of what they wished had happened. In this dream, Alia view themselves as how they were after 1,000 years had passed because of chapter 24. In reality, Alia created a time loop where them missing Remera was all thanks to themselves. In this chapter, Firstly, we tell presently that they are envious of them because they can say what they feel out loud and show fears without fearing of being labeled a defect and then disposed of. Because they got friends to protect them and love them no matter what. If Pasalia fights any of the units that isn't Allure or Veil, their dialogue will be this.
ここまで来るなんて強いのですね。あなたが味方であればよかったのに。
If we analyze this cue more accurately, Alia says, あなたが味方であればよかったのに。Mikata means an ally. Alia is there speaking on subjunctive mode, expressing a wish, a possibility. Yokatta noni is an expression that is formed on yokatta, meaning it's good or it's great, usually to express relief. What Pasalia means is that they wish to have someone as strong as Alia's alive to support them. Then maybe they would be safe. And we know from the exploration dialogue that Alia's friends still have dialogue and comments on Pasalia's appearance showing kindness. The people that supported Alia many times in their journey and encouraged them to pursue their dream no matter their feel nature. And now, what they say to Alia.
見ているだけでは勝てませんよ。まさか怖いのですか。怖いといえば怖いです。今までだってずっといつも負けることが失うことが誰かを死なせてしまうことが恐ろしいです。あなたはいいですね。私と同じ顔をしているのに自分の思いを素直に言えて、私は怖いという感情を表に出すことを許されません。恐れを口にすることは欠陥品だと示すことと同じ。
If we analyze what is said precisely, it seems that Alia is intimidated by Pasalia. They are cold, they don't emote, and their stats again indicate how powerful they are. Pasalia sensed it and asked them about this. That's where Alia talks about their fear. The way they use repetition, kawaii, and the use of the adverbial phrases of time, imamade, until now, datte zutto, always, and hitsumo, every time, accentuate this repetition, meant to convey in one sentence Alia speaking of all the time they feel scared. This repetition reappears as Alia states what they feared exactly: to be defeated, to lose what they love, and to cause the demise of the people they hold dear. This effect of repetition is creating an exaggeration, an hyperbole, which is meant to convey the intensity of Alia's fear. To which Pasalia answers by, あなたはいいですね. Literally, it means you are a good person or you are nice. However, in context, seeing the following sentences, it reads as Pasalia envyingly, seeing in them qualities they don't find in themselves. That they are a good person, implying Pasalia is not a good person. As Pasalia states, even if they have the same face, Alia is able to express themselves easily even though, as we established earlier, Pasalia, like presently, was constantly afraid. Hence, when Alia tells Pasalia about their fear through this rather hyperbolic sentence, where the feeling of fear comes from the repetition and the insistence of being constantly afraid comes from the use of adverbial phrase of time, which also creates an effect of repetition conveying the feeling of constant fear lurking that Alia was feeling, in which Pasalia and recognize themselves as they were constantly afraid. However, they also think that Alia is a good person because their fears are directed at others rather than at them. And they envy them for being able to express that, but also for having fears that Pasalia doesn't, having people they care, having something to lose. Pasalia has none of this. They have nothing. They only have the fear of dying that has become such a strange to them that not only do they say they can't show it, but that they aren't allowed to show it. Kowai toいう感情は表に出すことを許されません。 Like I mentioned earlier, the expression "the feeling cold fear" makes Pastalia feel even more devoid of emotion, as they seem to not even recognize the one emotion that was their fuel to stay alive for so many years. Showing fear, showing weakness, it's been defective. And Ali cannot afford to be labeled as a defect. That is their greatest fear and greatest pressure. Presently is freed from that. They are loved, they are friends, they are a hero. Pastalia is none of this. They are subjected to the constant fear of death, have for only companion Mark who cannot speak and the creature that terrifies them so. But Pastalia, seeing Presently, cannot help but feel bothered by them.
何か言いましたか？来ないのならこちらから行きますよ。あなたを前にしていると鏡を見ているようで落ち着きません。
The sentence "Kagami o mitairu yode" and them commenting on the unease they feel is because they are quite literally seeing a reflection of something they aren't yet, a vision they envy. That day, Alia gets their own self without even realizing it's an ideal. Someone that looks like them but represents everything that they aren't. A hero clad in white and beloved by many people who ambition for their field, who can find support. Pastalia wants to be like that. Keep in mind that Pastalia is in a pretty pessimistic state of mind. So seeing this earlier that in reality represents what they will become, being here is just showing them who they aren't and reinforcing their feeling of self-love. When they meet Romera, their crew indicate that in reality they still remember meeting Presently and show envy of their blue eyes and blue hair when talking to Romera, saying they were beautiful like hers. And in reality, they also remember the rules, the enemies they fought but wish would be by their side. Alia's only recurring memory is the day they died, aka their past selves died to give birth to a renewed Alir, a reborn Alir, as Romera promised. This day is what is presented in the prologue. The cutscene is titled The Final Battle of the Past, Kakko no Cutscene, and is part of the three cutscenes to have a name related to the past, like Red Memory, Aka no Kyoku, and Memories of 1,000 Years Ago, Senmen Mae no Kyoku. This scene, like the two others, take place in Lifo's castle, while the scenery of the two others has it been read from the fire burning in the prologue. It's blue, like it is in chapter 2 and 3. The royals are here because Ali remember meeting them in chapter 24. And in this reenactment, they are supporting Ali and fighting with them, clearing the way as they and Mark runs to where Sombron is. Ali is viewing themselves as they wish to be, as the mirror that once made them feel uneasy. They view themselves as current Ali, with their white clothing, their shining sword, and their feature taking after them someone who has their face, but also look like Romera with the blue eyes and blue hair. The person they thought they would finally become when they defeat Sombron, the person they so badly wanted to become. The music that plays is an OST called The Dragon's Dream, with it being a pun, because it's Alia's dream, as in the vision they are seeing of something that happened in the past, but idealized, where they are the heroes they wanted to become, on their way to defeat the evil dragon, but also dream, as wish, that it was what happened that day without realizing it, and finally, the dream that they pursued, the dream that led them to that place and to try to defeat Sombron all alone in hope of fulfilling it. The dream they will keep pursuing all along the story and wanted so much, so sincerely to fulfill, they cried while vanishing in chapter 22. The dream they transmitted to Vale, the same way Romera transmitted it to them, becoming a hero that saved the world. When Alia engaged in combat with Sombron, he has dialogue that are echoed in chapter 22, and clearly expressed his desire for the rings. The prologue plays out as what the story is supposed to be, Hadir, our hero, the good dragon, taking down Sombron, the evil dragon. The story Lumera told to Render and all people do Tingle to prepare their rebirth. The story she tells to herself in chapter 2, that they were the brave hero that defeated Sombron and saved the world. In a way, that is true. However, as I said, by saving Sombron and hiding the truth from Belier, Lumera isn't helping them to heal. The dream sequence of the prologue showing Sombron is quite telling. Hadir can never move on from their past and become who they want to be if they aren't the one to defeat Sombron. Even amnesiac and unaware of the truth, they still fear what they feared 1,000 years ago, because they were never able to overcome any of this. This prologue sequence is in reality foreshadowing Hadir's past without us realizing it, but cannot be identified as such until you reach chapter 24 and realize that Hadir created a time loop. This is however showing that Hadir from the early game, despite remembering only their name, is in reality was past Hadir was inside. This is past Hadir without the facade, having forgotten about everything what was inside the cold shell we met in chapter 24. The same way Sombron is sealed at the beginning of the story, past Hadir is sealed within the subconscious of present Hadir. This can also be illustrated in how past Hadir is a character you fight in a snowy map with violent snowfall. Past Hadir themselves is frozen in their own past, indicated by their childish speech, but also the frozen scenery in which you fight against them, and that can be attained only in the past. Again, despite the amnesia, Hadir still remembers unconsciously, something that sunk in Hadir's subconscious, like the shard we have to break. I have been searching for what kind of post-traumatic amnesia Hadir suffered, and from the symptoms identified, the case that has been most pointed out by fans was a form of dissociative amnesia. A type of amnesia where, despite the lack of precise episodic memories, one would still recall the sensation linked to this or this element from their past, which is Hadir's case, hence why they fear the corrupted, cry at Lumera's death, have countless deja vu and familiar impressions, etc., etc. Finally, these chapters ends with Murph saying a dialogue that feels more and more eerie as the scenery looks more and more like something from a dream you're about to wake up from. The promise that Murph made, which is to be able to stand with Hadir again, and his reference to the opening song, and that Hadir recalls in chapter 1. As for chapter 3's cutscene, Real Memory, our first introduction to Post-Hadir, While different in the English version, Lumera's cue when encountering them in chapter 22 is identical to this scene in the Japanese version. The reason why Hadir remembers themselves as having this evil smile is again explained by chapter 24. When Hadir faced Post-Hadir and that Post-Hadir asked them if they are scared of them, Hadir says that they are. Again, Post-Hadir is Hadir and vice versa. Hadir from the early game is still Post-Hadir without memories. Post-Hadir is still sleeping within them. So admitting that they are scared of their past selves is indeed showing that Hadir bore some self-love against their past selves. And that is not all. Let's see what Post-Hadir says in chapter 24.
何も考えず従うしかないのです。忌まわしい異形兵と同じように。異形兵が嫌いなのですか？大嫌いです。こいつらは私の兄弟たちを殺すのですよ。あなたに負けたら、いいえ、そうでなくてもいつかは私もこいつらに殺される。大丈夫、あなたは死にません。私が今ここにいるのがその証拠です。
When Hadir compares themselves to the corrupted, they use the expression
imawashi, which means disgusting, abhorrent, detestable, laughable, etc. It's an expression of profound disgust, especially at themselves for being like this, for being so scared that they are reduced to this almost robotic being who cannot think and can only obey, which is how they see the corrupted. The music in Engage seems to be from Alice's point of view on how they view things for the most part, so the corrupted theme having this disturbing and unsynthetic mechanical sound reflects this. They found themselves scary for being like those awful creatures, and Alice's initial fear of their past self is reflected in that cutscene of chapter 3. Besides, the deep love they bear for the corrupted is most striking in the Japanese version. When Alien asks them if they hate the corrupted, Igyohei ga kirai nano desu ka? Pasalir responds, Dai kirai desu. Dai means big in Japanese and is usually used to put an emphasis. For example, saying daisuki instead of ski is saying I really like this thing compared to ski, like love. So possibly adding the dai in their answer to the future self is an emphasis on how much they hate the corrupted. They don't just hate them, they deeply love them. And when designing the corrupted, they are using the demonstrative koitsura, which is a rather derogative and almost rude way of saying these guys, these people, reinforcing the aversion Oli feels for the corrupted. Hence why they say this imawashi that is a clear expression of disgust at themselves for being like the corrupted. And the most explicit evidence of Oli's self-hatred is definitely the defeat scene.
ことを思うだなんて。私は欠陥品です。欠陥品、欠陥品、欠陥品、欠陥品、欠陥品、欠陥品。
そんなことを言ってはダメ。あなたは欠陥品なんかじゃないわ。
けれど、このままではすぐに処分されます。お父様の異形兵の餌にされます。私はそれが何より怖い。
Repeating over and over again that they are defective because they feel conflicted over harming the one person that showed them some kindness. That is why they view themselves with this malicious smile and why they actually needed to see how they were from an outsider point of view rather than remembering everything to understand the truth about themselves. Again, chapter 24 in itself is symbolic of this, as Ali's enemy in this chapter is literally themselves. If the last chapters, 24 to 26, are Ali's last trial, there is no other way of interpreting them having to face their past in the literal sense than them having to come to terms that they had in reality a distorted view on themselves. Thus, we have to reach Persalier despite all the enemies and the snowfall preventing the progressions to see the truth. To reach the truth and finally see Persalier as who they truly were. Hence, when Ali is whispering words that are redirected at their younger selves,
大丈夫。あなたは死にません。私が今ここにいるのがその証拠です。
it is them finally realizing the truth about who they were and not just the reveal of being a fake dragon, but the reveal of always having this kind-hearted personality even long before when they were a fake dragon, a villain. It's an older, more mature Lewis comforting their past selves, even if they didn't hear those words and will never realize how kind they were in reality. So the cutscene in chapter 22 was in reality preparing this, and also creating a shift in the paradigm blue equal good, red equal evil, because the symbolic of the red and blue used to populate scene is used in chapter 3's death and chapter 25. We'll come back to this later. But when it comes to Alia's hair and eye colors, considering how they are associated to the light of fire in particular, there is another symbolism tied to their hair changing from red to blue. If you are familiar with how combustion works, then you must know that when fire radiates a light that is in what we call
warm colors such as red, orange, and yellow, this means that the combustion is incomplete. And in Lyra's case, in the alpha state, as an abused child with a childish vocabulary and living with a true purpose is incomplete. And again, with the idea of Soselius red color matching with the metaphor of Hakago, a newborn, a child is an incomplete state of an individual. We are still learning, growing, maturing, developing. However, complete combustion results in fire radiating blue flames. Hence, Alia's hair changes to this color as well as their eyes. Because they have reached the enlightenment apotheosis, they are complete. This is again showing how much they evolved during their journey, especially since they have now become the most radiant source of life, the fire emblem, that is to say, hope itself. Them becoming an emblem is thus a sort of ceremony of coming of age. After all Fire Emblem stories are to an extent a story of coming of age, with our character finally reaching adulthood. Earlier being in Emblem, the blue of their hair is proof they reach adulthood, that they are now complete. If Lure is an incomplete life, this journey is them becoming complete. Blue is the color of their rebirth. This is also shown in Hawalia's most associated flower, or blue roses, that they wear in their divine monarch outfit. The blue rose represents new beginnings and achieving. The red is the color of the past, childhood, while the blue is the proof that Halia is reborn as an adult. In the Japanese version of Engage, the scene, you are the 13th emblem, the fire emblem, is a bit different.
12の指輪の力で新たな生を受けたんだ。13番目の紋章師ファイヤーエンブレムとして。
ファイヤーエンブレム、私が13番目の紋章師に。
In reality, Alia's emblem name is written Kizuna Hen no Monshoshi, which translates literally to Emblem of the Fury Bound. And yes, this is what inspired the title of the ending song. It's also worth noting that the opening refers to this in the two command chorus when it says Tsunage Hono. However, both Moth and Ali read it as Fire Emblem in Japanese in order to read kanji because they are polysemical and have several readings. You often have what we call furigana to indicate how you're supposed to read what is written. Besides, it is not uncommon, especially in songs, to have a word in parentheses with the equivalent of the word read. And in the scene where the emblems bestowed the miracle, the signs are indicating that instead of reading the kanji as Monshoshi, it should be read as emblem, the English meaning of Monshou, which are present written in katakana. And in the same way, Alia's emblem name, Kizuna Hen no Monshoshi, reads thus as Fire Emblem rather than Kizuna Hen no Monshou. This indicates that Alia's emblem name is in reality Emblem of the Fury Bond, but that it is supposed to be read as Fire Emblem, the same way a kanji can be read in different ways. However, according to the developers themselves, they chose to go with Engage as a title because engagement, Engage Japanese name, as a noun means promise or bond, which in Japanese is the word kizuna. Honoro, the word for flame, can however also read as hen depending on how it is placed. For example, in Path of Radiance Japanese name, the miracle of the blue flame, the kanji Honoro read as hen because it is following the kanji for Hao, blue, and thus read as Soen no Kiseki. Hence, Kizuna Hen in reality is the Japanese spelling of engage, so Halir is the emblem of engagement. And as we said earlier, since engagement means bound or promise, they are the emblem of promise. So Fire Emblem Engage means in reality Fire Emblem Bound of Flames. Hence, Why their invocation when fighting against Sombron is Connect Us Fire Emblem. Tsunagayo Fire Emblem.
そして私こそがつなげよファイヤーエンブレム。
Alia's connection is what shaped them into becoming the very symbol of those connections, an emblem. And this time in the sense of the living representation of a concept, which is how emblems are described in heroes. In reality, all the protagonists of Fire Emblem are the one emblem of the message and theme of their games. The same is true about Alia, and that is essential when we are exploring the relationship with Lumera as explored in Chapter 2 and 3 and Chapter 25. Alia becoming the emblem of bonds and connection, what is connecting others? Hope is tied to the relationship with their mother, as she is the connection that helped Alia find love, kindness, and a dream. Likewise, her connection with Alia is what saved Lumera from loneliness and despair. And one of the most beautiful aspects of their relationship is how the game makes it clear that they are always connected, no matter what. If we focus on the dialogue they have in Chapter 3 when Lumera dies.
そんな私のせいでこんなことに。
バカね。あなたのせいじゃないわ。我が子が目覚めるなら、生きていてくれるなら、親は何だってするものよ。でも最後まで戦って。わかりました。私が必ず指輪を集めます。何があっても最後まで戦います。だから死なないでください。母さん。ああ、 私を母と呼んでくれるのね。ありがとう。その言葉、最後に聞けてよかった。
最後じゃないです。母さんの作った指輪、記憶が戻ったらくれるって約束しましたよね。それに起きたらゆっくり話をしようってそう言ったじゃないですか。
そうね。もっとたくさん話をしたかった。私、あなたのお母さんになれて幸せだった。
私も母さんの子で幸せです。1000年前の私も幸せだったと思います。だからお願い、思い出すまでそばにいて。まだ行かないでよ、母さ
ん。まったくこの子は。ほら、約束、母さんと指切りしましょう。これからもずっとそばにいるわ。いつか指輪を朝起きたらおしゃべりを一緒に。
母さん、母さん、母さん。
なんということだ。ルミエル様が、
神竜王様が崩御なさった。
母さん、起きてください。指切りしたのに、これじゃもう約束守れないじゃないですか。
Normally, seeing how polite they are, I'd expect them to call Lumera Okasama, which is more formal. For example, Corinne does that with Mikoto. And in Engage's case, Lee calls Sunborn Oto-sama. I think Alia calling Lumera Kasan is meant to show how much Alia loves her. To the point, they call her in a very much casual way, compared to how Post Alia called their other family member. When referring to their dead siblings in chapter 24, allies call their brother Oni-sama and their sister One-sama, using more polite and formal honorifics than with Lumera, which could make sense at first, seeing how polite they are, but the explanation is different. As for their mother, they call her Oka-sama. Freaking Oka-sama! Even their own biological mother. But Lumera, their adoptive mother, they call her Kasan. I think it's showing how much Alia loves her, and the fact that their connection is even stronger than blood. We have a little Alia, whose politeness at the time is due to only being treated like a tool and acting as such, but with Lumera, they act so casual. This line alone is the only argument required about how Engage's story also included that family is based on connection through bonds rather than blood. Now, it's important to point it out, but during the entirety of this chapter, Alia doesn't call her mother once. The first time they call her mother is during a death scene. In this dialogue, Lumera is saying haha instead of Kasan, whereas Alir called her Kasan. This creates a parallel to this scene with the role reversed. Now, the interesting bit is that Alir ended up screaming Kasan despite their memory loss and their initial reflexive politeness toward Lumera, showing a hint of subconscious memory. You know, those things that feels very familiar to Lee, and in general, they feel this more toward things related to the third world, but in this case, they end up feeling this toward Lumera because of that one cutscene in chapter 22. Lumera, luckily at the time, is dying in Lifo's castle. This is a familiar scenery, but with the role reversed. Instead of Lumera holding a dying Alir, it's Alir who is holding a dying Lumera. And this is even more explicit at the moment where Alir begins to cry again. They switch to hiragana.
私も母さんの子で幸せです。1000年前の私も幸せだったと思います。だからお願い、思い出すまでそばにいて、まだ行かないでよ。
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, current Ali speaks in kanji, past Ali is the one speaking in hiragana. Earlier switching at that very moment to hiragana is showing that their body remembers something that their mind don't, as they end up speaking just like they used to in the past, using the same alphabet as a small child. Also, I played with female Alir, and at the beginning of the game, she speaks with a more high-pitched voice compared to the later game, sounding much more childish as a result, making the immediate politeness seem even more like a mechanism, and in this scene, it's a striking parallel to the cutscene of chapter 22, as Alir speaks with the exact same tone as their post selves in that very scene. So, when the scene switches to hiragana, it makes it like the same scene replays with the role reversed, as if Alir remembered what happened, despite it being subconscious. And when Alir and Lumera makes the pinky promise, and that Lumera's finger ends up falling, Alir say this.
おしゃべりを一緒に母さん母さん
allies say Kasan in hiragana before switching back to kanji. This happens in chapter 25-2, where the last word that allies will say in hiragana will also be Kasan, creating a parallel to that scene.
In the last promise they made, if we focus on what Lumera is saying, those are the words that Alias took to heart, and that, as I said earlier, they will apply to themselves, even to the point of committing a grave mistake in chapter 10-11, and they will echo when confronting corrupted Lumera. Besides, the expression Shinyu Toshite, which means as a divine dragon, is one of Alias' critical quotes,
神竜として
which is translated as I am the divine dragon, and when Alias speaks with Lumera's throne,
母さん、今までずっと守ってくれてありがとう。きっと長い旅になると思いますが、バンドレたちも一緒なので心配しないでください。私は神竜として必ずあなたの意志を継いで指輪を集めます。行ってきます、母さん。
in reality, this is a child bidding goodbye to their mother as they are going on a journey to grow up and mature as an adult. Alia insists that they need Lumera. Remember that in the beginning of the story, they are very dependent, and the most important part that they retain is, you promised me to give me the ring you made when I regain my memories. The promise they made at the end of chapter 2, and that was not fulfilled, or at least not how Alia imagined it, since they do remember the first promise they made 1,000 years ago with Lumera, and they will end up wearing the ring, this time as an emblem of their connections, all thanks to their bond with Lumera. As I said, Alia switched unconsciously to how they used to speak 1,000 years ago. Again, Alia of the early game is Postelier. Postelier is right here, often showing themselves through those little reactions of the early game, as if the seal, that is the amnesia as a mechanism of self-defense preventing current Alia from accessing their episodic memory, was ready to be broken at any moment. So when they are speaking in hiragana and being Lumera that she stay with them until they remember and to not leave them alone, it's in reality Postelier being the one and only person that made them felt love, to not abandon them when they are this weak, to not leave them alone, the broken child asking the one person that allows them to step out of the darkness and keep them alive so they can fulfill their dream, to not leave them in a world they know nothing about. That is why they are crying as if they knew her for their entire life, because that is the case. Postelier knew Lumera for so long, and she matters so much to them that even when they cannot exactly remember, losing her made them cry and speak in hiragana once more without them realizing it. It's because their bond is that strong, because they are always connected, that even when their memory lacking, Alia still feels this deep love for Lumera and cry to have lost her, and that they will always mention how much they missed her in front of Queen Eve, or when talking about knowing the pain of losing a parent. The link between Lumera and Alia is also translated musically, so we'll see that there is two melodies that are associated to both of them.
This part of the opening, mainly played on piano or organ or any instrument of the sort, is conferring a feeling of softness. But the more the music progresses, the more the notes accumulate, imitating the movement of the light falling, accumulating slowly, the movement of the glow that gains in intensity until it becomes a bright burning light. This reflects Alia's own arc, as their Japanese name, lure, means glow. Alia's name has the symbolic of being a lure of hope, a theme constantly explored in Engage.
Alia's theme is thus linked to the opening song of Engage. It plays in the Dragon's Dream, and a twisted version of it is offered in the soundtrack Memories of Red Days. Alia's other most important connection, Veil, has a theme song called Silver White Heart, whose melody goes like this. This nostalgic and mysterious yet innocent melody is linked to this part of the opening. The title with the white is felt in the melody, the sweetness and softness given by this melancholic tone and the instrumental. This gives a nostalgic feeling, and the music sounds like what white would be if it was a sound. Additionally, Veil shares a name pattern with someone being linked to darkness, yet she is associated to white, the color of the divine dragon. So, this title seems to be about her heart being uncovered, as if a veil got lifted. And given how in reality Alia meets her when she is wearing a mask, that's fitting. She is showing her honest nature, and this contrasts really well with her alternate personality. Veil's dual hair has white and black, but her black hair clashes so much that it makes the white part feel much minor despite it being the dominant. The silver is here to complement the white in order to make the color shine by conveying the image of a pure white immaculate color that shines brightly, tying to how Lumera and Alia's name are from a luminous pattern. Additionally, it's tying to how the music is meant to feel childish and conveying Veil's childlike personality, and Alia feeling familiar to Veil, teasing their sibling bond and therefore explaining how they could connect so fastly. This also contributes to the feeling of betrayal, since this music feels like it's home to Alia, as most, if not all, of the song seems to be composed from their point of view, or to try to restitute their perspective of things, all the more so when this track has its dark equivalent with Black Silver Devastation. Besides, her sweet melody contrasts with this part of the opening that is very tense, the climax before the explosion that is the chorus. So this is already showing Alia's feeling some sort of nostalgia in front of Veil, even if they can't grasp it yet. As for Veil, she always encounters Alia in plays that might seem to be coincidental, but in reality, when you know that she is seeking for her sibling and that said sibling is Alia, it's in reality, much like Lumera's and Alia's encounter, the work of their connection being so strong that they ended up meeting without knowing who they were to each other. In Lumera's case, the leitmotif most commonly associated to her is this song. This soundtrack is slow, calm, and the sounds are a little sharp, rapt even, which makes it feel like the musical manifestation of the light. And much like Alia's whose theme is linked to the opening song, in reality Lumera's theme is inspired by the ending song of Engage. Besides, this theme plays when you meet Lumera in the soundtrack called Holy Land of Lethos, but less slower and with another melody to accompany it in a polyphonic manner. Garden of Light plays in Alia's room, and since it's Lumera's theme song, this contributes to the feeling that Alia always thinks about her, and that she is haunting this place. As much as the narrative, we represent still being here in some way, watching upon Alia as she did for 1,000 years while waiting that they woke up. In chapter 24, the soundtrack Two Encounters is mixing both Lumera and Alia's leitmotif. It is Two Encounters because it is referring to Alia and Lumera's encounter, and the encounter of their respective themes, one representing light and the other the glow. This is the theme where musically their connection begins through creating a new melody, the one used in this song. The music is representing of their bond and the harmony between the two, creating a new melody in which you can feel this feeling of softness. And finally, a theme that comes very often is the leitmotif of the chorus. The only musical part that the opening and the ending song shares without a lot of variance. Now, let's focus on... This chapter is entirely built of power loves. That's one of the final trials that Halia needs to overcome to be able to defeat someone and finally become a hero. When you meet corrupted Lumera, her cues are in reality nearly identical to the day you meet her in chapter 1.
本当にあなたなのね。そこにいるのはあなたなのね。
母さん。
会いたかった。
え？
あなたが目覚めた気配がして早く会いたくて飛んできたの。どこも痛いところはない？体が動かしにくいだとかは？はあ、会いたかったわ。私の愛しい子。あなたの気配がして早く会いたくて飛んできたの。
そんな、どうして？
久しぶりね。
And her invitation to enter the castle is in reality the same cue that she has when she suggested that Ali would follow her to a warm place when they meet for the first time in chapter 24.
でもここは寒いわ。風邪をひいたら大変。どこか暖かいところに行きましょう。立てるかしら？ここは寒いわ。お城の中へどうぞ。龍門を壊しに来たのでしょ？大丈夫。すぐに襲うなんてことはしないわ。中でゆっくりお話をしましょう。
When you meet her, the song All Way of Darkness is playing. This is a much darker take of Lumera's leitmotif in the same way that Halia's usual theme is played in a much darker iteration in Memories from Red Days and Defective. However, whereas in chapter 1, Halia was unable to recognize her and had to ask her if she was her mother, in this scene they are the one able to tell and calling her Carson right away. However, in this scene, Lumera is still keeping an act that makes her at first not that different from the time she was alive, but once she is alone with Vale, things get worse. When Lumera talks with Vale, she is offering her to call her Carson, which is how Alir calls Lumera, and probably a reference to how Lumera made the same offer to Alir. Now, I want you to compare Lumera's voice actor's performance and how she pronounced the word I pointed out much earlier.
お話できて嬉しいわ、ベイル。あなたはあの子の妹なのだそうね。それなら私の子のようなものだわ。母さんと呼んでも構わないのよ。ああ、お母様の？どのような方なのかしら。一度殺すというのね。痛かったわ、あの時の魔法。体もだけれど、それよりも心が。我が子と引き裂かれる辛さでどうにかなってしまいそうだった。あなたさえいなければ私はあの子とずっと一緒にいられたのに。一度仕留めたからと見くびっていたのなら甘いわね。死ぬのはあなたの方よ。この欠陥品。
優しくて温かくて愛情の深い人だったわ。物心がついた頃には死んでしまったけど、最後まで私を守ろうとしてくれた。いつかパパの封印が解けてしまったら、その時間違った方に行こうとしていたら、家族として止めてあげてと言っていた。
私をもう一
Compared to the performance delivered by Mitsuishi Kotono in chapter 1 and 2, and in the several instances where Lumera reappears, where her voice is detached, calm, and where she usually pronounces much earlier the words that are emphasized, almost playfully, in this performance Lumera sounds so inauthentic. Even the Zutoi Shoni sounds incredibly cryptic and psychotic, which again isn't helped by the overall dramatical movement that I pointed out much earlier. She sounds so fake. The way she pronounces the words as she is reaching for higher notes ends up making it sound broken.
痛かったわ、あの時の魔法。体もだけれど、それよりも心が。我が子と引き裂かれる辛さで、どうにかなってしまいそうだった。あなたさえいなければ、私はあの子とずっと一緒にいられたのに。
And as this scene plays, you can hear the song called Burn Earth of Gredolon, whose title is meant to parallel with Holy Land of Lithos, as much as Whole World Darkness is meant to parallel Garden of Light. And as the name indicates, Whole World Darkness was an old way leading to this soundtrack whose key is even lower while playing Lumera's theme, giving it the sense that she's completely twisted and thus long before she reveals her true colors in front of Faith. This isn't the sounds of life anymore. This is the sound of darkness. Again, look at her and her smile. When Alia arrives, her look and manners completely changes to revert to being similar to how she once was.
まあ、この子ったら、そうまでして母さんに会いたかったの？
When Lumera called Sombron Lord Sombron, that's how she actually revealed that she was indeed lost. And that is when she began to speak of how lonely she was. And as she speaks, the melody that is called 1,000 Years Alone plays.
ソンブル様を悪く言うの？あの方のおかげでまたお話ができたのに。
ソンブル様。やっぱりあなたは。
私はずっと寂しかったの。1000年前の戦争で私は一人ぼっちだった。父と母を殺され、仲間も殺され。それでもただ一人で戦わないといけなかった。
This song is taking the main chorus of the opening, the part that says, つなげ炎を伝えよ愛よ Connect the flame, convey the love. However, the voice sounds more like a lament, reflecting the lamentation of a lonely woman deprived of connection and left alone for 1,000 years and having to wait for another 1,000 years. This song is like a musical manifestation of Lumera's pain and loneliness, as if she was the one singing this lament under the form of this Pay attention to what she says, because this is the only moment where she will sound sincere.
私は一人ぼっちだった。父と母を殺され、仲間も殺され。それでも、ただ一人で戦わないといけなかった。神竜たる私が諦めたら、逃げてしまったら、世界が道連れになってしまう。そんな中、あなたに出会ったの。あなたは無垢で、純粋で、悪意がなくて、愛情を一つも知らなかった。敵なのにどうしても殺す気にはなれなくて、ダメだと思いながらあなたと心を通わせた。あなたが私の名前を呼んだあの日から私は一人じゃなくなったのよ。お願い、もう私を一人にしないで。ここにいて。いいえ、
それはできません。母さんはあの日私に最後まで戦ってと言いました。何があっても、私が何を思い出しても世界に平和をと願っていました。そうでしょう。
そんなことどうだっていいじゃない。今の私はあなたといることを望んでいるのよ。
そうですか。よくわかりました。今のあなたにあの頃の母さんの意志はありません。
おかしなこと私はここよ。私があなたの母さんよ。
いいえ、ずっと会いたくて大好きだった。あの時のあの母さんはもういません。私はあなたを倒します。どんな敵でも立ち向かわないといけないとあなたがそう教えてくれたから。
そんな悲しいわ。母さんはとても悲しい。あなたの妹が、お友達があなたをそそのかしたの。紋章師たちは、竜の森人は何をしているの。誰もあなたを止めないのなら私がみんな殺すしかないわね。
In the same way that Italy in chapter 3 was begging Lumera to not leave them alone, it's now Lumera begging Ali to not abandon her again, like she was for 1,000 years, during the war and even during the time of peace. And as Lumera goes on, the music intensifies, has the feeling of threat. However, Ali refuses by quoting the last words she uttered as she was dying in their arms.
何があっても何を思い出しても神竜として最後まで戦って。
それはできません。母さんはあの日私に最後まで戦ってと言いました。何があっても私が何を思い出しても世界に平和をと願っていました。ええ、そうでしょう。
Again, when she answers, her voice gets more and more twisted and less authentic. And the song playing is called Distorted Flash of Light, which is referring to Lumera's now corrupted nature, deformed, twisted, denatured. As earlier pointed out, she is no longer bearing the same wish. She is no longer the mother of that time. As I said earlier, Lumera has a more silly side and tender one where she wishes to spend time with Oli, and in chapter 2, when she thinks she's been too pushy when telling Oli she hopes that they will view her as their mother again, she is saying,
ごめんなさい。
いいの、謝らなくていい。すべて思い出さなくったっていいわ。それでも、もし私を少しでも母だと思ってくれるのなら、その時は母さんと呼んでほしいの。1000年前のように。ごめんなさい、今のは独り言。親子としての時間を過ごしたくて、ついあなたに会えて嬉しくてわがままを言ってしまったわ。
わがままだなんてそんな。
すっかり困らせちゃったわね。今日はもう休みましょうか。
Lumera back then considered that asking such a thing of Oli a matter seemed selfish. As someone who kept on fighting for others, no matter how she felt, she had to bear a bit of putting her dreams and wishes aside for the greater good. So she considers even small things like this to be an immense treasure that could get her to be called selfish for asking for such a thing. After all, again, when Oli was dying in chapter 22, the promise she made with them wasn't about her to be forever reunited with Oli. It was about Ali's dream becoming reality. This is again showing Lumera's selflessness, as in this moment she was speaking about what her child wanted, and not about what she wanted, to never be apart from them again, even though she was again about to experience losing someone in being alone for another 1,000 years. The time she made a promise like this to Oli was in chapter 3, and because Oli was begging her to not abandon them. So again, considering Ali's feelings and not hers. However, this Lumera is indeed behaving selfishly by saying that the world doesn't matter anymore as long as she and Oli are together. Yet, even then she's still insisting, but as Alia said, this isn't Lumera. This is just her despair taking over.
そんな悲しいわ。母さんはとても悲しい。
This line sounds so fake. The way she says it, her expression, and even the movements of her hands. Compared to chapter 2, when Lumera said she would shed tears of joy, this line feels insincere.
ありがとう。ダメね。嬉しくて涙が出そうだわ。そんな悲しいわ。母さんはとても悲しい。
Even the way she says Kasan sounds so artificial. And then Lumera does say the line that confirms that she is completely drawn into an obsession, the egoistic wish of not being alone ever again.
あなたを止めないのなら、私がみんな殺すしかないわね。
And even as Ali is saying that they are ready to take her down, they are crying.
私がすべきことです。目を背けてしまえば親友として紋章師として何より母さんのことして胸を張れなくなってしまう。共に戦いましょう。そして誰一人欠けずにソンブルのもとへ。
お兄ちゃん。でも涙が。
みんな行きますよ。母さんの魂を解放し最後の流門を破壊します。
ダメよ。戦場では誰も待ってくれないの。どんな敵でも立ち向かわないといけないわ。どうか逃げないで。あなたは私の子。皆を守る神竜なのよ。
However, their back is turned as such that they are trying to hide the fact that they are crying. So, if you recall what I said about Veil wanting to stop Sunburn from making any more mistakes, and how Ali would have to do the same with Lumera, this is what I am referring to. Sunburn's actions are all coming from the fact he was unable to move on from his past and overcome the loss of the Emblem and his home world. Ali's trial here is to defeat Lumera to show they were able to overcome her loss, whereas Lumera is, as a corrupted, unable to accept the loss, that she cannot fulfill her wish, that it is now too late for her. Even though she was able to handle the loss of her other family member, she is haunted by how she could never fulfill her wish to spend time with Lear. If she fights against any one of your army, she will say this.
私の願いはあの子と共にいたい。ただそれだけなの。ねえ、邪魔をしないで。
This line does reek sincerity, unlike when she's talking to other characters. And if she's fighting against Veil, she will say this.
何度来ても同じこと。あなたに私は倒せないわ。
やってみないとわからないよ。何度も叩き潰されたって絶対諦めない。私がどうするかで未来が変わるってお兄ちゃんが教えてくれたから。
まあ、あの子が羨ましいわ。その思い出、その時間、未来も夢も希望もみんな持っているのね。けれどそんなもの見たくないわ。あなたばかりずるいじゃない。目の前からいなくなって消えて、今度こそ立ち去りなさい。
Veil is Alia's only sister, their only remaining family. If you give her the pact ring, again, the diary note indicates that she and Ali would often have chit-chats and chill meals, which is what Lumera wished she could do with Lear. So her jealousy towards her killer to be able to do what she had been dreaming to share with someone for so long, and Alia, that is understandable. Lear was Lumera's hope, most important connection, the one thing that would comfort her, and now she's deprived of it, and worse, it is trying to kill her. She had to give up on her hopes, dreams, and her future. So she is envious not only of Veil, but of the living, because she cannot accept what she has lost. This and her campaign does show that she is like Sombron at the moment. She is completely desperate. And when you fight her, the song called Goddess in Shadow plays, which like distorted flash of light is meant to convey that this Lumera is the Lumera that was hidden. The despair, the sadness, the loneliness that Lumera hid. When Alia is saying they'll free the soul of their mother, they engage in this labyrinth-like maps to free Lumera's soul from the despair in which she's currently entrapped, to reach the part of Lumera that she never let anyone reach up until now, to prevent her from falling into the same path of mistakes as someone which caused everything to happen in the first place, and plunged the world into darkness. It's one of the most important themes in Engage, along with Bones, the lesson that Hallie had to learn in chapter 10 and 11. Overcoming loss, stop seeking for what is lost, and instead move on to a brighter future, which is to an extent what all other characters are experiencing in their supports. Lumera cannot come over it because of her and Alia's tragic story, which is very similar to another character she is closely linked to. Sigurd is the main protagonist of Genealogy of the Holy War for the first act of the story. He is told.
命を落とすことがどれほどの無念か。私はあなたの分まであなたの最愛の子を守ると誓おう。
Sigurd is a character who is closely linked to Lumera. He is the emblem she is using in chapter 2, and in the opening song, his incantation spell is mentioned in the same lyric as the one mentioning Elias. In general, he seems to be associated to the parental figure since Zithia is the one who bear him when we fight the hounds, the same way he is linked to Lumera. And considering that Zithia is also a fool to Lumera and that corrupted Lumera behaves in a twisted mother way, like Zithia, it seems to indeed be a person since he is the only emblem character in the main story to be canonically apparent to another character. And I stress it, canonically! His invocation is linked to love in the opening, and in Genealogy of the Holy War, the fruit of his love with Daedra, Selith is the light that saved the world from Loftus. He represents in a way Lumera's wish to convey her love to Alia and to be familiar with them, which she could never do in her lifetime, having loved them 1,000 years ago, and then in the main story. But also, if the opening reads as more talking to Alia, has something that Alia didn't got to do when they woke up from 1,000 years. Tell Lumera how much they love her, having forgotten about her, and this even with the subconscious mirroring, which in reality makes it all the more tragic that they couldn't properly tell her what they felt. Much like Lumera, Sigurd is a failed hope, a light that died too soon. He didn't even realize he was in reality fighting against the Lothrian Coast's machination the whole time, and he died without realizing that he was being played this entire time. He thought his love for Daedra would be enough to conjure the cruel destiny, and he was hopeful in the strength of his bond. The idealism he showed turned out to be deceived in the most cruel way. Lumera on her side, when she died, transmitted her burden to Alia when they weren't ready, when they actually needed her the most, the same way that Sigurd transmitted his burden to Selith, and that the second generation had to correct the mistakes committed by the previous generation. Lumera can no longer be the hope of this world, but she was instead corrupted by Sombron, by despair, and stuck into that state. We were discussing the parallels this chapter have with chapter 2. Well, remember when I said Alia's discomfort in Nifl's castle was because it wasn't their true home? Well, here, they are fighting Lumera in their previous home, Brandon, with the scenery being an obvious parallel. But now, let us see what Lumera tells the stewards when they fight her.
ルミエル様、主たるあなた様に刃を向けることをお許しください。
そんなにかしこまらないで。今のあなたはあの子の騎士よ。私のためにも全力で来てちょうだい。 久しぶりね、バンドレ。
またこうしてルミエル様と言葉を交わせるとは。あの時はあなた様をお守りすることができず申し訳ありませんでした。そしてもう一度打ち倒すことをどうかお許しください。
そんなにかしこまらないで。今のあなたはあの子の騎士よ。私のためにも全力で来てちょうだい。
なぜあの時まで遡れぬのでしょう。あの庭園でもしもう一度会えたなら、私はあなた様、いえ、たとえもう一度会えたとしても、私はまたこの場所であなた様を止めるのみ。参ります、ルミエル様。
ルミエル様。ルミエル様に攻撃だなんて、ちょっと僕相当しそうです。
しっかりなさいクラン。狙いを外さないようにね。
ルミエル様、僕は
しっかりなさいクラン。狙いを外さないようにね。
どうしてその言葉。
そうじゃないと私すぐにあなたを殺してしまうもの。
ルミエル様、恐れ多いですけど今は敵なのでお覚悟を。
その息をフラン、あなたの本気を私に見せて。
ルミエル様、私ひるみませんから、たとえ相手があなたでも。
その息をフラン、あなたの本気を私に見せて。
どうして、これじゃまるであの時みたいで。
あの時っていつかしら。その時にあなたを殺しておけばよかった。
Yes, it is the same quote as the one she has in chapter 2. In fact, the fact you were fighting her in chapter 2 was in reality a subtle foreshadowing for this chapter, because I don't think any of us would have expected that to happen. Hence, the way you had to fight her with the stewards and still have to fight her was in reality preparing this. But that's not all. Pay attention to what Lumera says. The lines that are common to what she said in chapter 2 are said in a natural, sincere tone, while the new lines added to the dialogue read as twisted and fake, showing that the despair is denaturing her. Lumera is clearly enjoying this training session in chapter 2, and no wonder why when you know the whole story. The fact that she and Alia never got to spend proper time as mother and children, to the point that things as trivial as snacking together and chit-chatting together is something that Lumera said she dreamed to do with Alia. Even though Alia is amnesiac, she's still enjoying this time they spend together because it is the first moment they are finally reunited after 1,000 long years, and they can finally be a family. The song that is playing is called Mother and Children Reunited, because this is in reality the first and last time Lumera and Alia will spend time as family. The happy title shows that nothing could have let Lumera imagine that they would be parted again. And if you compare this song and Goddess and her puppets, those are in reality the same as Distorted Flash of Light and Goddess in Shadow, the latter being a darker version of the former because the tone has changed. Again, the leitmotif being about connecting and love is playing. And in Mother and Child Reunited, it's genuine happiness from Lumera's perspective, while in Distorted Flash of Light, it's a lamentation that such a thing never happened. It's no longer the so long-awaited reunion in which Mother and Child will partake in a friendly sparring, taking place in this beautiful, colorful garden under the blue sky. It's now a deadly battle in a dark temple for the sake of the world. But Lumera still remembers this day and cherishes it. And why wouldn't she? It's in reality the only time she could be with Leah's family, the first and the last. She keeps obsessing over how they won't be allowed to spend another day like this one. And she repeats, not seeming to realize the full extent of it, what she said to the stewards and earlier back then, as if this time it was Lumera and no longer Leah that was frozen in time. As if this time something was going to change. After all, when Lumera found Leah, they were frozen in time, speaking with this childish dialect, and now it's her that is being invaded by memories that she cannot properly identify, and dialogue that is still twisted in how it ends with her pretending to kill the stewards.
母さん。
ああ、ここなら存分に鍛錬ができそうね。紋章師の力がいくら強くても戦うのは
母さん、それは
戦うのはあなた自身。違う、これはいつの記憶なの。私はただあなたと過ごしたかっただけ。一緒に話してお散歩をしてご飯を食べて、それから
もういい、もういいんです。私もしたいことがたくさんありました。でもできないままでいい。母さんがこれ以上苦しまない方がいい。今ならまだ間に合います。お願い、聞いてください。いい
え、せっかくソンブル様がもう一度私に時間をくれたのだもの。諦めないわ。相手があなたでも止められない。だって待っていたのよ。ずーっと待っていたのだもの。1000年間も。
Again, the last words she utters are sounding completely twisted, which does show indeed that the Lumera you are facing is still the one you meet in the garden, but that she is twisted, corrupted by despair. Her plea to spend more time are sincere, but the way she acts is showing that she is broken, deformed, corrupted. As for Lee, the most tragic part in all of this is that they, at this time, didn't even realize it was the first time and was going to be the last one they would be spending time with Lumera. This event did mark them too loud. The prologue to unlock the Pact Screen is showing this since the map is very reminiscent of the map of Chapter 2, taking place in a garden and with a formation and progression following the same pacing, with even a parallel to Chapter 1 where instead of only ordering to run away, they are the one ordering to fight the corrupted to Vander. And this is a parallel where again, Ali will ask themselves questions about Lumera, if she did have a partner too, and who was the most important person, since they can also develop such a bond. Chapter 2 is titled Queen Lumera or Divine Dragon Lumera in the Japanese version, because this chapter is focused on what Lumera wished for so long, to spend time with Leah, no more, no less. Chapter 25 is however titled The Last Guardian, to show how Lumera went from this kind mother figure to Leah's last enemy. The depersonalization can be felt in how she is no longer the mother that you fight in a friendly sparring, but in a serious battle. This is no longer her name, this is a new epithet. Knowing this, the tragic aspect of the relationship is that even in this friendly sparring, Lumera was the enemy to defeat, a way to prepare Leah for the chapter where they will have to be the ones striking her down to show that indeed they are the Divine Dragon, an emblem, and her child, which is echoing to the words she told Leah when she told them not to run away in Chapter 2. Even though they both wished for it, Lumera could have never stand next to Leah as an ally. She is always the opponent. They cannot stand together for as long as she was alive and even after. However, when Lumera dies, it's the moment where Leah's growth as a character is allowed to shine.
ごめんなさい、母さん。
そこにいるのはあなたなの？ その指輪受け取ってくれたのね。
母さん、意識が元に。
約束思い出してくれたの。
はい、眠る前にした約束思い出せました。私は紋章師になったんです。
紋章師に？まさかそんなことが。そう、ここまでたくさん頑張ったのね。
母さんにこの姿を見せられてよかった。いつかあなたに伝えたかったから。
ミエル様の体が消えていく。
異形兵としての体は役割を終えた。こうなることは分かっていたわ。
ごめんなさい、母さん。あなたをまた一人にしてしまいます。
いいえ、私はあなたに出会って一人じゃなくなったわ。家族を失ってあなたに出会うまでほんの数十年の孤独にすら耐えられなかったのに、あなたが眠った後の1000年間はいつかまたお話できるって、そう思うだけで少しも寂しくなんかなかった。今だってこれからもずっと。
私もです。私もあなたに出会ってから一人じゃなくなった。誰かとのつながりが温かいって初めて思ったんですよ。
あなたは私の光よ。私の子になってくれてありがとう。
ありがとう、母さん。私はあなたの子になれて幸せでした。いつかまた会えたらゆっくりお話ししましょう。指切りしてくれますか？
もちろんよ。忘れないわ、この約束を。あなたのことを。ああ、綺麗な空が見えるわ。まるであなたの目覚めたあの日のよう。これからはこの空の先までずっとあなたが守っていってね。
母さん。
お兄ちゃん。
平気です。悲しむことはありません。母さんはあるべき場所に帰ったのですから。きっとまた会えます。外に出ましょう。結界を確認しないと。
Compared to Chapter 3, Halia has now regained the memory of the promise they made. They are no longer the weak child begging for their mother to stay. They have come so far and accomplished so many things. Instead of being the one begging Lumira to stay and reproaching her to not hold her promise, it's Halia who is asking for Lumira to forgive them for abandoning her. Truth is that in reality, Halia never got to know the true Lumira. Yes, they still retain the feelings they had for her, which is why her death marked them so. But in the same way that Halia had to go through this journey to know who they also have to learn the truth about Lumira, which again brings us back to the labyrinth aspect of map 25 to free Lumira. So, they didn't realize that Lumira was this lonely back then. Again, it was just the scream of a child begging for the only person who ever shown an hint of kindness to them to not leave them all alone in the world. And to us, the player, we knew even less than Lear. Hence why, when she died so early, we didn't feel the connection that Halia felt. And instead, we felt up in this trouble with Lear, and we discovered with them the meaning of their tears. Again, Halia themselves, being deprived of their episodic memory, doesn't realize fully the extent of their feelings for Lumera, nor even the why. When they spoke in hiragana in chapter 3, they didn't understand the meaning of it, and us, the audience, much less. But with Oli, we discover more about who Lumera was, about the meaning of Ali's tears, about what this sudden change from kanji to hiragana meant. And when I finally understand who the real Lumera is, and the truth behind the feelings they had for her, it's too late. She is now dead and they have to fight her. When they finally realized the meaning behind their tears and the love they had for her, it was too late. And now they have to fight her and bid her farewell forever this time. When we, the audience, are finally given the chance to learn who Lumera is and why they loved her so much that they would cry as she died without remembering anything, it's also too late and we have to watch Ali kill their mother and bid her farewell.
あなたは私の光よ。私の子になってくれてありがとう。
When Lumera is saying this, it's because again, Ali was a hope. In the eighth suppose they have a friend tells Ali about how she would come to seek comfort by telling them everything, even if they wouldn't hear her, because they had this reassuring presence. Marin echoes this too when she mentioned how Ali's presence appeases her. Again, Ali is hope. When a child is all alone in the dark, what kept them away from being scared is the glow of light that escaped from the lamp that reassures them. Like a night light, Ali reassures people. People are drawn to Ali and Lumera because people are drawn to light and scared of the darkness. Hence, Ali's reassuring presence that is mentioned in those supports ties directly with how they are hope. How light in general represents hope. What is reassuring when we are in complete darkness, scared of the dark. There is no doubt Lumera would feel the same toward them, and that she clung unto that dream, that wish that one day they'd be reunited. The soundtrack playing is called Thank You Mother, and this is a lighter take on the soundtrack called Pinky Promise, which plays during Lumera's death in chapter 3. Again, the theme of promise is omnipresent in Engage, and the thing is that whenever Lumera is bringing up the topic of making a promise or Pinky Promise, it's written in hiragana, conferring a feeling of genuine innocence and almost childish purity to that act of promise. And again, these songs are using the leitmotif of Fire Emblem Engage, which corresponds to those parts of the opening and the ending. As the title indicates, this is all about Ali accepting that they lost Lumera, and instead of grieving, they thank her. The tears are no longer tears of a child begging their mother to not abandon her, mixed with sadness and fear. This time they were able to convey their feelings. And when Ali is saying Watashi mo, they are using hiragana. Unlike chapter 3 where it's unconscious, in chapter 25 they are actually fully aware of that shift. This happened right after Ali got to meet their child self, and thus to know the meaning behind this speech pattern. If chapter 3 is personally begging for their mother to not abandon them, chapter 25 is Ali having remembered that they were past earlier, and thus symbolically past earlier accepting the death of their mother and realizing that it isn't because they lost her that they should lose hope, or that they will be alone, because they found allies, with whom they share a sincere bond of friendship stronger than anything, capable of defeating despair. Friends with whom they share a practically familial bond as shown through several dialogues such as this one.
これでまたみんなと一緒に。
Literally, Minato Ishoni means we are all together, and ties to what Lumera was saying about Ali in chapter 3, Zutto Ishoni. This we are together shows that Ali feels a familiar love toward their friends. They say the same thing when she says,
ずっと一緒にいられるね。
ベイル。
and the emblems as well at the end of the story when they say that they consider Ali as family. As for Ali, them being aware of what they are saying of the switch to the hiragana is indeed showing that now they fully understand the truth about them, about Lumera, and having matured now, they can finally do a proper farewell, having found a new family that helped them reach adulthood and becoming the hero they dreamed of becoming. Again, this scene takes place in a red scenery compared to chapter 3, where it took place in a blue one. Yet Ali holds Lumera in the same position, while the way she had them in chapter 22 is in the other direction when facing the camera. Even if the scenery is red, as Lumera pointed out, the sky is still as clear and blue as the day she reunited with Ali. Also, back to Alia's hair for a moment.
But display with the camera is a constant, where Alia's hair and eyes are used in such a way that while depending on the gender you choose, it mostly shows that Alia's nature relies on their mixed origin. With Metal a scene like the miracle can be seen as the blue, divine side being incomplete due to the red streak. But as he reaches for the ring, he finally is complete. While with the Metal it is the first side that began to turn divine through the blue streak, and again, when she reaches for the rings, she finally is complete. Despite their hair color being swapped, the fact it is so irregular always is reminiscent of Ulia's nature. They aren't complete. The two, the fell and the divine, have to intertwine between each other for Ulia to be who they are. They are never complete on one side or another. They are both.
So this time, the presence of red and blue is also to symbolize how Ulia managed to reconcile with their past selves. They no longer fear how they used to be. They actually accept it. The red isn't the symbol they used to be evil and the blue that they are now good. Red is the color of the childhood, their past, and blue that of their adulthood, of tomorrow, of hope. The proof of one side they grew up and on the other that they are still the same person as their past self, that this child grew up. It's only accepting their past self and also embracing their identity that they are reborn with, because one side cannot be complete without the other. As she said in chapter 1, Lumera loves Ali regardless. Ali of the past and Ali reborn are both our child and incarnate into one individual, Ali, who is heading her and bidding her farewell as they make one last promise. Another promise to reunite again someday. This line is again tying to the symbolic of Alia's name. Alia becoming an emblem represents the importance of bond and hope itself. The connection she had with Alia is what saved her, what gave her hope, and in the context of Alia's growth as a person, that they went from the weak gleam of light that survived the darkness to a bright shining light. And while I am at it, the Engage cut content revealed that the characters were originally supposed to call Alia by their name when engaging with them. Remember when they always called them Divine One or Shinryu-sama, Lord Divine Dragon? I think it is quite showing of how Alia found their way after becoming an emblem, and how their lives acknowledge them as more than just the Divine Dragon. And when Lumera vanishes, like in chapter 3, the last word Alia says in hiragana is Kasan. And when they say,
平気です。悲しむことはありません。母さんはあるべき場所に帰ったのですから、きっとまた会えます。
We don't see Halley's face until they say, I am sure we will meet again. This means that Halley's perception changed. In chapter 2 they didn't know at the time that it was the very first and will be the only moment they will spend with Lumera as family, as they forgot everything. But during their journey, by the time we reach this point, Allie gained enough knowledge to realize that. So fighting Lumera and Lumera saying the exact same things as she did in chapter 2 hurt them even more, as it is reminding them of the only time they spent together as family. But Allie realized that it was their first and only time as acting as family, and that they wouldn't have a second chance to spend time together as such again. So Lumera's sudden death was this time a farewell forever, but Allie ended up maturing enough to accept it, but to still cherish their mother no matter what. Allie has come to terms with the loss of Lumera. The way they went from begging her to not leave them to accept her death and stay hopeful, the way instead of the end of chapter 3 where they would beg her to open her eyes, they instead look at the sky and say that they aren't sad. This shows Allie's growth as a character. How they reconcile with their past selves, how much they matured. And when Allie learned they are going to be apart from the emblems, they are showing the same reaction, which contrasts again to how they reacted in chapter 10. And all of this is in reality foreshadowed by this very innocent and light-hearted chapter 2. And when replaying the game, chapter 25 is now haunting me. Thinking about how in reality this is the only moment they will know as family, that Allie will never realize it, that makes it all the more tragic. But at the same time, it makes you appreciate even more this chapter. This map, where you will actually spend a friendly sparring with Lumera before being forever separated from her and having to face her as a foe as you watch Allie grow as a person. Chapter 2, when knowing the full story, is the quintessence of the beauty of Allie's and Lumera's relationship. How they can never spend time as parent and child other than this one chapter, and how Allie will be able to mature and accept her death, but no longer view it as having lost her forever. A bittersweet ending, but even then, you cannot save one of the most beloved person Allie has, who did so much for them back then that they would still cry at her death despite amnesia. However, it's not supposed to be sad, because even then, they still share a connection. The darkness in Engage makes every of those cheesy, funny, and Power Ranger like light-hearted moments even more endearing, because of how well it balances with the rest of the story. And this makes the tragic aspect hidden behind all those light-hearted moments, such as chapter 2, when we realize that Lumera and Allie never really got to be a family, to the point that Lumera was dreaming of sharing trivial moments with Allie. Much like how losing her family made Lumera literally dream to have the chance to have long night talks, walks, and share meals with someone, this balancing makes us, the audience, realize that the happy moments the characters go through are a chance they need to cherish. Thank you for watching until the end. I didn't plan on making another video, to be honest, and not one that long. You see, Engage is kind of a special game to me. It came when I was in a period of my life where I was constantly sad and tired and sick. And this story's sincerity, honesty, and simplicity helped me. That game was really what helped me go better. Its goofiness, its sincerity. I truly think it's a very hopeful story that made me realize how lucky I was that people would still be here to support me and help me overcome the difficulties I was struggling with. This story showed me the way to heal. For the first time, I laughed. I cried of emotion rather than anguish. And after this year, I started feeling better. I was able to walk again. I was able to go a day without overthinking everything. Making analysis of this game story gave me back motivation to walk and inspiration to draw. I think it's telling a really beautiful story, even if a bit cheesy and clumsy at times, but that is very inspiring. The bond between Lumera and Leo in particular is a very moving story. So I really want to share what I like about this game. I tend to find stories more personal, more about themes that are inherently human, such as overcoming loss, or the power of bonds can take you anywhere, or it's never late to become who you wish to be, and about always having hope, and so on, to be much deeper than complex political story. And to me, Fire Emblem has always been more about great themes on humanity itself than politics. Even if it has its flaws, it's still very dear to me, and I hope more people will get to appreciate it. Yes, the story isn't groundbreaking, but it has so much to offer from a meta, intertextual point of view, yet it can still stand on its own and reveal it's full of symbolism and subtleties. Anyhow, enough true Madam Ting. Thank you for watching this, and thank you for the kind feedback on the last video. I hope that if you love Engage 2, you will love it even more, and that if you didn't try it yet, you will give it a chance, and that this video brought to you as much life as Leo did in Lumera's life. And don't forget to read the Engage manga, it is so freaking good.